Good morning, members. Please sit down. Agenda item 1, prayers. I'd like to welcome Reverend Canon Jeff Bennett, Rector of Falmouth and Rural Dean of Cornwall South, who will lead us in prayers today. Welcome.
So it's good to be with you here this morning, and I shall lead us now in a time of prayer. And in the silence of this place, we pray for God's wisdom and grace and understanding and leading in all that this council has to do for the benefit of the people that are being served. King of Kings and Lord of Lords, we give thanks for those who are in public life. We pray for our King and the royal family, and especially through all the trials and tribulations they have faced recently. For the Prime Minister, Cabinet, Government and Parliament, and for all who assist and advise them. Pray for those who serve in local government and for all who work for local councils. Be present in all their deliberations and guide every exercise of political power. Cleanse every tendency to self-interest and inspire the ideal of serving others, that tactics may be tempered by compassion and decisions informed by wisdom, and that our country be led into the light of your kingdom. We acknowledge our own responsibility to pray for those who govern us, and we ask you to remind all who make up the church in our land to do likewise. For we pray this in the name of him whose own authority flows from his readiness to serve, even Jesus Christ our Lord and Saviour. Amen. I shall now lead us in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. I've been notified of the following apologies for absence today. Councillors Candy, Desmond, Jewell, Kirk, Kirkham, Mitchell, Towell, and late arrival of Councillor Parsons. Is there any others? Councillor Bunny.
Thank you, Chair. So apologies for a late arrival from Councillor Long and also Councillor Cole. Councillor Cole may have to join us online.
Councillor McGowan.
Thank you. I may just have to leave at 1:30 for a short period.
Councillor Martin.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the list that you read out, but Councillor George and Mitchell have given apologies for late arrival.
Any others? Okay. Councillor Morgan.
I have to leave at lunchtime. I've got another appointment later on.
The monitoring officer has agreed that the following members may join us remotely for medical reasons. As you will appreciate, they are not able to vote, and that's Councillor McClenning. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. In accordance with the Constitution, I will now take declarations of interest from any members for any items on the agenda. Will members please indicate any items in which they have interests and the nature of those interests? If you are aware that you have a disclosable pecuniary interest or a non-registrable interest in any matter being considered on the agenda, you must disclose it, whether or not you have already entered the register. No? Okay. Agenda item 4, Chairman's announcements. Firstly, congratulations to those residents in Cornwall who have received national honours in His Majesty's Birthday Honours List. An OBE was awarded to Ian Jones of Monacan for service to space communications. MBE was awarded to a member of the Cornwall Council staff, Sharon Adams of Parr, as she works for residential and short-term breaks service manager for services to disabled children and young people, particularly for her work with COVID. Also MBE for Anthony Atkinson in Callington for services to wildlife and ecology. Professor Tanya Krawiska of Penzance for services to higher education and the video games industry. Andrew Lockett of Torpoint, Treasurer of the South Atlantic Medal Association for voluntary services to veterans. Claire Pooley of Truro, Chief of Staff at the House of Commons. And Pamela Waters of Newquay, Strategic Leader of Curnow English Hub for services to education. BEMs were awarded to Sally Borton of Truan for services to the community of Truan. Sheila Cholwell of Bude for services to Bridgeroll in Devon. Sarah Jane Corbridge for services to the community in Helston. David Farley for services to community of Weybridge and Lanreth. And David Nichol, Deputy 2nd Coxswain of Falmouth RNLI for services to maritime safety, and Maureen Rickard for services to the community of St Minver. I very much look forward to meeting them all at their investiture and thank them for their dedicated service for the community. I would like to congratulate the newly elected members of Parliament for Cornwall, particularly Councillor Jane Kirkham and Councillor Andrew George, who only last month were sitting here with us in the chamber. I wish them all well in their new tenure. I would also like to thank the previous 6 MPs for their service to Cornwall and its residents. I was delighted to be involved with the panel of the Trelawney Plate this year. The Trelawney Plate is awarded every 2 years to the person judged by a senior and representative panel to have contributed most to the spirit of Cornwall. Edward Richardson, the farming advisor for Farm Cornwall, received the Trelawney Plate award this year in recognition of his outstanding contribution to Cornwall, especially to the farming community at its heart. I'd like to welcome members of the Youth Council who have joined us in the chamber today and hope they enjoy their day. And finally, my next chairman's charity will be Cornwall Air Ambulance, as they provide an essential service to our community and also in support of their current appeal for a second helicopter. I'm sure every one of us in this chamber will have a story to tell from within our divisions on the vital emergency care they deliver and lives they've saved. Let's get that second helicopter in the air. Agenda item 5, leaders' announcements.
So good morning everyone, it's good to see you all here this morning. Following the general election, I would also like to congratulate our new MPs, whilst at the same time offering thanks to those who served as MPs under the previous government and for their service in Cornwall. Immediately after the results, myself and Lord Hutton, chair of the new Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Economic Forum, wrote to the new Prime Minister with a request and an offer to help. Our request was to establish a minister for Cornwall who could represent this very unique part of the world at the heart of government. And our offer was for Cornwall to be at the forefront of helping the government to deliver its ambition in leading a green industrial revolution. In that letter, we set out how Cornwall's natural assets, our floating offshore wind and wave power, our critical minerals, our thriving tech space and cultural sectors could all play their part in a thriving UK economy. Our agriculture and fishing industries, second to none, could quite literally feed the UK. I've also taken the opportunity to also call for fairer funding for Cornwall going forwards, stating that over the long term we are confident that an empowered Cornwall, armed with the ability to realise the aforementioned opportunities, can become less dependent on funding from Westminster. However, in order to reach that goal and address the acute challenges faced today, we are also urgently needing a promise of funding to sustain growth and services for 25-26, and therefore a fairer funding formula that gives justified weight to population profile, sparsity, deprivation, and social economic factors that demanding demand and cost. I will, of course, keep you updated regarding any response that I receive. Last week saw the inaugural meeting of the new Economic Forum, which will provide a voice for our business community, both locally and nationally, which is really good news for Cornwall. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Professor Emma Hunt, the Vice-Chancellor and Chief Executive of Falmouth University, as the Forum's Vice Chair. Alongside Lord Hutton, it is fantastic to have such a formidable team fighting for Cornwall. Now, since the last meeting, we've received the good news that our hard work to recognise our armed forces has been recognised nationally, with the announcement that Cornwall Council is a finalist in the Working Together category of the 2024 Soldiering On Awards. I could not be prouder. Members will recall the Climate Emergency 5th Anniversary motion that was brought to full Council in January, and I'd like to update Council on the progress that has been made. Councillor Alvey met with the proposer and seconders of that motion and relevant officers, and the following have been agreed. 1. Key strategies are in development for each of those challenges in the local energy plan, local nature recovery strategy and a Cornwall adaptation strategy, all of which will shape how we respond to these challenges and be an essential part of the evidence base for the refresh of the local plan. Secondly, encourage members and residents to fully engage with the development of that local area energy plan when it is out for consultation in the autumn. The plan will provide us with a costed path to a net zero economy and will be vital as we review our carbon neutral targets to refresh our action plan and inform our future dialogue with government. The motion also called for improvements to the way we report progress on our work to respond to the climate emergency. Recognising the scale and complexity of the programme, officers have committed to continue to review what is reported, including the addition of emissions that are out of the Council's direct control, or Scope 3 emissions, such as those of our arm-length companies. We have created a reports and review page on the Carbon Neutral Cornwall Hive, where quarterly performances, reports to the Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee are also shared, and links to this will now be included in the newsletter to where members will be updated. As part of the Cornwall's Carbon Neutral, the Council is proceeding with a programme of tree planting on non-productive areas of the Council farm estate, funded by the England Woodland Creation Offer Grant. And finally, I must add my thanks to everyone who's helped organise the elections, from the organisers, from their work in the 6 weeks from the starting pistol being fired, to all the poll clerks and supervisors and counters who work so diligently. Organising and running an election on this scale is no easy task, and I'm proud of all their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Agenda item 6, minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of May 2024. I will move that the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday the 21st are correctly recorded and that they be signed by the Chairman. I'll ask my Vice Chairman to second the minutes. Councillor Rouse, would you please do so?
Happy to second, Chair.
The vote will now open. Please vote for, against, abstain using, or for, against, abstain using the options on the microphone base.
Ten seconds left to vote. Vote closed.
And that's carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item 7. Can we have a little bit of hush, please? Agenda item 7, questions from the public.
Sorry.
I'd like to take this...
Point of order, please, Chair. May I? This is a question about the process. It's for the monitoring officer, please. There are 3 questions from leading members of the business community, including the Chief Executive of the Chamber of Commerce, on the process of the airport transfer or disposal. I know that you have said those questions won't be allowed, but I wondered if you could explain to the meeting why that was, and also why you told those questioners after the deadline so they couldn't change their question to something that would have been allowed on this important matter. Thank you very much.
I'll bring the monitoring officer in.
Thank you, Chair. So the questions were rejected on the basis of disclosing commercial or exempt information. I'm not able to give any more information beyond that. I'm actually back on my first day from leave, and they were rejected. Sorry? No, it wasn't me. It was my deputy, or the person standing in my stead, who was rejected. But from what I've seen, I'm comfortable that they were appropriately rejected for the grounds that have been given.
Sorry, the second question. Why were they told after they didn't have a chance to put in a question that could have been asked?
Sorry, I can't answer that because I've only literally come back from leave this morning.
Okay, so we'll carry on now. Questions from the public. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that, as agreed by Council, up to 30 minutes be given for questions from the public. I will be asking the public to read out their questions. Where the member of the public is not present, my Vice Chairman will read the question. At my discretion, a questioner who has put a question in person may ask one supplementary question without notice to the member who replied to the original question. Any supplementary questions on this must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. Today we have 5 questions. Question 1 is from Mr. Evans of Liscard, who is not in attendance today, so I will ask my Vice Chairman to read his question.
Why were wheeled bins issued to homes in PL 14 3AY plus minus half a mile radius and presumably county-wide, where there is nowhere to store them other than at the front on pavements and roads, when it has been confirmed to me repeatedly that this is against the Council's own policy?
I'll ask Councillor Mole, portfolio holder for neighbourhoods, to reply.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, it's sounding up. As part of the new waste collection service being implemented throughout Cornwall in stages, all properties have been allocated new containment for their rubbish and food waste. In the majority of cases, properties have been provided with a 180-litre wheeled bin for the storage and presentation of their waste. Where there is no storage on the property, no access to the storage location other than through the inside of the property, or access issues due to flights of steps, properties should have been allocated with a 180-litre protective sack to store and present their residual rubbish. The Council undertook an assessment of properties in this regard, but with 287,000 properties included in the changes, this is a significant undertaking, and some properties may have been assessed as having storage access when that isn't the case or their position has changed since assessment. If householders believe that their property has been incorrectly assessed, they can apply online to have this reviewed and reassessed via the Council's website. Householders should not be storing their waste bins on the pavement or highway in between collection, and where this is identified as occurring, the Council can take action in this respect, including changing the container type a property has been allocated following liaison with the relevant householders. If this is found that this is the cause of the issue and the householder doesn't have any storage on their own property for a wheeled bin. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 2 is from Miss McLaren of St Austell, who is in attendance at County Hall today. Miss McLaren, would you like to put your question?
Hi, is that on? Thank you for your time. It's both a controversial and urgent issue I bring. So the question is, climate experts agree our food system is unsustainable. Half of our arable land is used for livestock farming, which is an immense contributor to the climate crisis. Farmers could play a role in meeting net zero targets and transitioning towards a more sustainable system. Will you support animal farmers make those changes that are needed?
I'll ask Councillor Alvey, Portfolio Holder for Environment and Climate Change, to reply.
Thank you for your question, Ms McLaren. Having declared a climate and ecological emergency, Cornwall Council have worked with our tenant farmers and the wider industry to promote low carbon farming, short supply chains and regenerative agriculture, supporting the transition of Cornwall's food and farming towards an exemplar of low carbon and regenerative agriculture. With over 75% of Cornwall farmed in some way and over 75% of our farms being livestock and dairy enterprises, we recognise the importance of farming within our economy and the need to support all farmers to transition towards sustainable land use practices that will help us tackle both the climate and ecological emergencies. Cornwall Council and our national landscapes, formerly called the AONBs, are actively working to encourage and support such transitions, including the Forest for Cornwall, which has worked with farmers who have made essential contributions to reaching over 1 million trees and 1,000 hectares of new woodland across Cornwall, including planting some of the country's first agroforestry demonstrators. Local Investment in Nature Cornwall, or LINC, which is supporting the development of natural capital projects and connecting them to potential investors to help achieve 30% of land, rivers and seas well managed for nature by 2030. The Farming in Protected Landscapes Programme, or FIPL, and our Nature Recovery Farms Liaison Officer, who are working with farmers to support them to transition to the most nature and climate friendly farming. Working closely with Benneman on our council farms estate to deploy technologies to capture fugitive methane and create renewable energy and transport fuel. And the Local Nature Partnership, Council and National Landscapes all hosted an award-winning regenerative farming hub at this year's Royal Cornwall Show, a first for the show. So we remain committed to the climate and ecological emergency responses, and we will continue to support all farmers to transition to sustainable land management practices that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase carbon sequestration and contribute to nature recovery whilst remaining viable and producing quality food for our communities.
Ms McLaren, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I think so. Thank you very much. That was very thorough and informed. I'd like to contact all of those people. I'm wondering whether you actually accept that animal agriculture and fishing are some of the absolute worst climate emergency effectors. That's good. Poor language there, sorry.
Councillor Alvey.
I would agree that some farming practices involving animals are unsustainable. However, we support the most sustainable animal agriculture practices that we possibly can.
Thank you. Question number 3. This question is from Mr Barnes of St Austell, who is in attendance. Welcome, Mr Barnes. Please, would you like to put your question?
Good morning. So, as there is clear evidence to show that even the most impactful plant-based foods have significantly lower carbon footprint than even the least impactful meat and dairy, will the council commit to a plant-based menu in its internal catering and promote plant-based menus where it has influence?
I'll ask Councillor Harris, Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Resources, to reply.
Mr Barnes, thank you for your question. The council does not have a specific meat or plant-based procurement requirement or contracting approach with regard to its catering provision within council buildings or at events organised by the council. We do offer vegan options in all our on-site catering facilities. I am personally very supportive of our local farmers and their contribution to our local economy and our natural environment, as already touched upon by Councillor Alvey. I am also pleased to promote the work the Council is actively undertaking with the farming sector related to sustainable food and farming practices. Whilst personally I would not support a move to a council approach to a plant-based food requirement for internal and event provision, if another member here wishes to submit a motion related to this, they are at liberty so to do, enabling the matter to be fully debated by this council. Thank you.
Mr Barnes, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Do you recognise that you could make significant gains by moving to a plant-based, so that you could actually cut down the amount of carbon that you're producing in your meetings?
Councillor Harris.
Thank you. I would just say, there are a lot of farms in Cornwall. The majority of these are livestock, and I think it would be totally wrong to do anything to damage these. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 4. This is from Mr Hewlett of Newquay, who is in attendance. Welcome, Mr Hewlett. Would you please read your question?
Thank you very much. The 2019 climate emergency is estimated to have cost Cornwall £400 million in a conservative estimate. Councillor Alvey has irrefutable evidence that the South West has added 1 tonne of extra carbon dioxide from 2019 to 2021. Whatever you are doing is not working. It is time to admit the sun is responsible and cancel the emergency. Thank you.
I'll ask Councillor Alvey, Portfolio Holder for Environment and Climate Change, to reply.
Thank you for your question, Mr Hewlett. Cornwall's greenhouse gas inventory for 2021 did show a 4% increase on the previous year as a result of the reversal of the dramatic effects COVID-19 had on all parts of society. However, we have seen a 3% overall decrease in Cornwall's emissions since our climate declaration, and as an administration and a council, we remain committed to responding to the climate and ecological emergencies and our recognition of the need to adapt to an already changing climate, a commitment which was reasserted by Cabinet in June. Thank you.
Mr Hewlett, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes. It's all very well making claims like that, but do you have the evidence that the climate emergency exists? Do you have actual evidence that you can refer to, other than somebody telling you that the climate emergency actually exists?
Councillor Alvey.
Put simply, 90% of climate scientists on this planet support the fact that there is a climate emergency caused by man-made effects. The remaining scientists who disagree with that have a right to disagree, and I appreciate you tend to side with them. But I think if you look at the membership of this chamber, with a few exceptions on the side of the argument on which you sit, the vast majority of us all agree that there is a climate emergency and it is largely man-made. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 5 is from Mrs Sorensen of Saltash, who is in attendance today. Welcome, Mrs Sorensen. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you for the opportunity. To allay serious anxiety about the disposal being adopted by the Council of Cornwall Newquay Airport, has professionally recognised commercial aviation expert been engaged to review the current operation at the airport and to provide advice on how the great potential economic opportunities it presents can be fully maximised?
I will ask Councillor Gardner, Portfolio Holder for Economy, to reply.
Thank you, Mrs Sorensen, for your question. I will be clear, I've been clear throughout this process, and I will state again, there is no intention to dispose of the airport. The Council has made clear throughout the...
Sorry, can I point of order, please?
Can I finish my...
On misinformation. No, not come on. Disposal is the word used in the document. Can you take that back, please?
No, I will not take...
It's in the document. This is incorrect.
I will be clear. There is no intention to dispose of the airport. The Council has made clear throughout the strategic review and the subsequent process that the airport must remain open. The CBRE team advising on this strategic airport review are from the CBRE Strategic Transformation business. This team comprises ex-Big Four and other major financial consultancy advisors allied to property advisors. As part of the initial strategic airport review piece carried out in 2022, CBRE applied their multifaceted technical skills covering corporate finance, business management, vision and strategy development, and organisational design to consider all options open to the council for the site. They also considered the options through a range of financial and commercial lenses before providing advice to the council. CBRE are the largest commercial real estate advisor in the world. They have been and are currently advising on a number of airports across the UK, and that includes investments in airports across the UK. As a result of this strategic review, it was determined that the airport should serve as a catalyst for economic growth, increased employment and training opportunities, and inward investment on the wider site. This can only be achieved by the airport remaining fully operational and by growing to achieve its full potential.
Mrs. Sorensen, do you have a supplementary?
How to choose. Thank you for that reply. In spirit of transparency, will the council pause the current process of negotiations with the proposed partner, the American company Westcor, which, as far as we are aware, has no track record of running commercial regional airports, and allow an open and thorough consultation with Cornwall businesses and the wider community in Cornwall?
Bring you in.
Can I just check with the mooring officer, because I think that was almost word for word, one of the questions that was removed. Am I able to answer that?
Well, to the extent that it might reveal confidential or exempt information, then no, you shouldn't. I didn't say it did, I said to the extent that it might. So it's how Councillor Gardner answers.
Okay, what I'm not going to do is comment on individual names or names of companies. What I will talk about is the process. The process has been undergone now for over 2 years. That has been an extremely long, thorough and protracted process, and that process continues. That process has been conducted for a large part through the council's processes in the public eye. At 5 separate public meetings, okay, which occurred in public, and 2 informal meetings which were private. Obviously, your background is in business. I'm sure you understand that part of these negotiations continue and must continue, the commercial aspects of which must be in a private manner until the appropriate moment to actually share that more widely. We have not reached that appropriate moment yet. However, I do commit to conducting a large part of the remaining process in open. To that effect, we have already held a number of roundtables. Those have included the Airport Consultative Forum, which contains a number of the businesses located on the airport, as well as a number of the local authorities. That happened last week on Wednesday. On Thursday last week, it was discussed by the Cornwall Economic Forum, which contained representatives of every single business sector from within Cornwall. I've got future roundtables booked this month with the Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Small Businesses, and Cornwall Marine Group, and others, and I openly offer roundtables to any organisation within Cornwall that would like a roundtable with myself. In September, when the process has moved on slightly, and we've got more information available, we will conduct a series of focused engagement sessions, and that will be both with the general public and with the business community, and that will take place in September. And in addition to that, there is an all-member briefing next Friday at 1300, which I would encourage all Cornwall councillors to attend.
Thank you. Agenda item 8.1, Capital Programme Update. I will ask Councillor Harris to propose and Councillor Taylor to second the recommendations set out on page 27 of the agenda pack. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. This is probably the simplest update ever. It's a net uplift of £35 million. This actually encompasses £46.3 million of uplift, which is reduced by decreases in the capital programme of £11 million, all of which is set out on page 32 of today's papers. The key point here is that all the gross £46 million increase is funded either, and in the main indeed, by central government grants or Section 106 contributions, i.e. there is no new Cornwall Council money going into the programme. In terms of reductions, the largest is the Hug 2 grant, where we, like many councils across the country, were awarded monies by central government to deliver more energy efficient homes, but due to tight timescales and problems with suppliers, it has proved impossible to deliver the entirety of this programme within the timescale set down by central government. I would emphasise here that we've not been alone in this issue, and many councils are also returning funds. I'm happy to propose the resolution and, of course, to take any questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely happy to second the proposal. And just to emphasise, as Councillor Harris has already indicated, there is no requirement for any additional funds to come from Cornwall Council. Thank you.
Please raise your hand if you wish to speak on this question. Just keep your hands up just for a minute so that my Vice Chairman can see. LeBroy, is it Clark? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just some questions on clarity, really. In the programme reductions, it says essential flood and coast protection, £43,000 reduction. Now, I know that's quite a small reduction. I'm just wondering why that is, because that seems quite important. So I just want to know why that's been reduced. And then I've got a wider question about this council headroom. On page 33, it crops up in the media time and time again, and I'm still not entirely clear what it is, what it goes on, how it's being funded. But for this year, we've got £35.5 million, and then year on year, it increases exponentially, being a total of £250 million over the next 4 years. And that's quite scary, considering I, as a councillor, I'm not entirely sure what that means. So some clarity on where that money is, what it is, where it's going, if we're paying interest on it, what it's funding, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Harris, are you wanting to take these at one at a time, or are you happy to group them? It's up to you.
I'll take it one at a time, because there's probably some good questions in there, otherwise I'll get lost. Harbour Reserve is a very specific amount, and I'll have to come back to you on that. In terms of the headroom, and it's a question of mine, there's a full report on headroom in the Q1 reporting to Cabinet, which I think is next week, Leader, to Cabinet next week. So I hope that your questions will be answered there. You asked a question about borrowing. The headroom budget is there to literally give us headroom for capital projects, or to team and lade if one's gone over, one's gone under, etc. But obviously, we don't. If we need to borrow, we don't actually borrow physically until we need the money. So it's not as if, as you say, there's £250 million in there. It's not as if we've gone out and said, oh heck, let's go and borrow that now and stick it in the bank. No, we haven't. But I'll get back to you on the Harbour Reserve money.
Councillor Harris, you don't need to stand, and I think possibly you would be picked up better if you stay sitting because of where the microphone is. Okay? Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Chair. It wouldn't be a capital update without a question from me, Councillor Harris, which I know you always look forward to. Just a point of clarification as well, please, in terms of the reduction in EDRF grant funding for the spaceport, which is at 3.194 million. And just the relationship, really, it was previously reported had been a funding risk within the spaceport programme, specifically relating to grants received and state aid complications. So just the relationship between the 3.194 reduction in EDRF grant and the previously approved 2.39 million headroom budget that was required to cover shortfall.
Councillor Harris.
Chair, I really don't like sitting down, but I accept it's easier. Councillor McGowan, I always enjoy your questions because they're always so good and to the point. It's a question I've already raised. The reduction is, this was flagged up, I think it was flagged up in Audit Committee as well, which is probably where you got it from in the first place, was there was a disagreement, and there still is a disagreement with DLUC, Department of Home, Local Government, etc., in London, about whether what we had done with the money and how it was treated was correct within terms of the grant. That argument is still ongoing, but officers have taken the view that we are right to be cautious. So what we have done is taken that grant out of here, but cross-funded it within the headroom one. In other words, this is one that's in and out, and more will become clear. I will make sure it becomes clear in the report to Cabinet next week.
Councillor Fitter.
There we go. Councillor Harris, I just wondered, sir, while we got you, if I could refer you to the community infrastructure levy that was published and the latest additions and requests from that levy. I just wondered, could you explain to us why we need to give a subsidy of over £2 million to British Rail?
Councillor Harris.
I'm not actually sure where you're looking, Councillor Fitter, and I don't think there's anything this report covers.
Oh, indeed, sir, but while you're here and asking monetary matters, I would refer you to the levy that is the suggestion that we should give Railtrack or British Rail.
You're in the wrong part of the meeting. It's just for questions for
No, I'm referring to a question about finance. It's all tied up with the
Sorry,
same.
Councillor Fitter, if you want to ask me this question in questions to Cabinet members, I'll be happy to answer you, although I might well promise you a written reply there. But as the Chair has pointed out, this question is not right in this place. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for the lack of clarity, sir. Thank you.
Councillor Broy.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I am very concerned over the capital programme potentially running away with itself, as indeed you quite rightly were throughout the last council. I refer you to page 33, the prudential borrowing line, which looks like it's going to escalate fairly on a very high level over or projected over the next few years. But what I'm particularly interested in is the actual impact that has on our council taxpayer. So the question to you, and I wouldn't be surprised if you weren't able to answer me now, so I'd happily accept a written response, is out of every pound contributed by the Cornwall Council taxpayer, how much of that goes to service our debt? And if you please give me two dates, the first date being the 6th of May 2021 and the second date being today's date, 16th of July 2024.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Councillor Broy. You're right, you will get a written answer. I actually believe this is something that's addressed in various reports anyway, but I will come back to you and obviously copy full council with a written answer. And of course, I understand your concerns. They're my concerns as well. Thank you.
Councillor Conway.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm quite concerned that we are being asked to vote on something which is going to become on a Cabinet report, which is coming up for next week. The slush fund, otherwise known as council headroom. I don't know how else you can describe it really, but that is going to be described in a document we can't yet see. So it's going to be very difficult to vote on that particular document. But what I have a problem with, apart from the fact I haven't seen the document yet, so how we can vote on that is difficult, is that the revised capital programme on page 32 at the bottom is 35,216,000, and funnily enough, the slush fund for the current year is 35,521,000. There's a great similarity between those two figures. Now, I am looking for an assurance that that is purely a coincidence and that the two figures are not linked. So that's the main question I've got. The other point I would make, and I have taken the assurance that you have given Councillor Harris, is that all of the monies that are in the additional amounts here aren't coming from Cornish taxpayers, but are coming from additional grants that are coming in. So the net result, as I understand it, and I would ask for your confirmation on this, is that this additional capital uplift is not going to cost Cornwall anything. Thank you very much.
Councillor Harris.
Actually, last question first. That's just what I said, so yes. There is a similarity between those two numbers, yes, and I picked it up as well. Some would say there's a similarity between chalk and cheese. There's absolutely no relationship between them, however. In relation to the headroom thing, this is coming to Cabinet next week, and whilst I can't refresh my mind in the Cabinet papers, something like this normally goes on to full council, but of course, every member of this council is entitled to turn up and ask questions at Cabinet. Thank you.
Councillor German.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Harris, in relation to Councillor McGowan's question, those papers are probably going to be published later on today. Cabinet's next week. You've seen those papers, you've signed them off. So why can't you just give Councillor McGowan the answer?
Councillor Harris.
I'm not even, sorry, my memory's getting poor, Councillor German, which particular question that was. But Councillor German, I don't carry those papers around with me. Today is full council. I'm addressing the papers in front of me. I'll be more than happy to answer the questions next week. And as you say, the papers will be published later on today or tomorrow. And at that stage, we're all free to look at them, and we'll come back to it then.
Madam Chairman, the question relates to the papers in front of us today, and as with Councillor LeBroy's question, Councillor Harris simply isn't on top of his brief. He's not willing to give a verbal answer in the chamber to members, and it has to put things off. Okay. It's appalling.
We're going to go to the vote now. So there's no more questions. The vote will now be opened. Please vote for, against, abstain using the options on your microphone base.
Vote is open for a further 10 seconds. Vote's closed.
And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 9.1, Audit Committee Annual Report. I will ask Councillor Thoms to propose and Councillor McGowan to second the recommendations that are set out on page 35 of the agenda pack. Councillor Thoms.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will stand, which I think is the formal way of doing things in this chamber, and I've not seen it today, so I will stand to make my report. The thing for me is that being chairman of audit is different, and it's different because we're not like scrutiny. We don't dig in and look at things and ask questions. We seek assurance that things are done correctly, and we've got a programme of works over the year that is basically set for us in many ways. But I can tell you the good things about audit is seeing the people that are involved. Take Councillor Whidden. When she joined the audit committee, she met with officers and said, look, you know, this is my agenda of climate change. And now she's starting to see the fruits of her hard work, and I think she should take credit for that. Councillor Conway, I know you've been taken off the committee, but you and Councillor Arthur actually asked some serious questions, and I thank you for your diligence during the time. I don't know whether Andrew, do I call you Andrew or do I call you Mr. MP for St Ives? Whatever that is, you know, I thank you and John Divenan for your input on crucial matters when you look at it. Laurie, my vice chairman, I think as a youngster, I think I can call him a youngster. You know, he is a very astute young man, and he works very hard at what he does. And I fully appreciate the support he gives me, you know, in the committee. And the last thing is the officers. Holly Sykes is an award-winning officer. She does a great job. You know, she's accessible. People can go and talk to her. And not only that, and I know Kate will appreciate this, she's taken over the elections part, and I think the elections that have just been, I think were well run and well supported. So, you know, we have a great team. Are we perfect? I don't think we are. This is a self-assessment. This is how we view ourselves. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not 100% sure. There is a mistake on the papers, on the first one, item on 15.
30 seconds.
Page 111, it should be 11. But other than that, that's the yearly report that we vote on, and I'll ask Laurie to second. Thank you.
Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll stand because, like every good Vice Chair, I do what I'm told by the Chair of the committee. This has been a really effective year for the Audit Committee, fulfilling all of our statutory functions in a really challenging external audit environment. Echo Armand's thanks to Holly Sykes and the internal audit team, who've done a great job in supporting the committee and maintaining really high standards. And without doubt, you know, our audit team is the envy of many other local authorities in the quality that they provide. Thanks also to the finance teams who have been working really hard to meet challenging deadlines for previous year's audit. They've done a fantastic job, you know, working night and day to make sure that we get what we need for the deadlines that are set by HM government. So really happy to second this report. Thank you.
Please raise your hand if you wish to speak or ask a question. Councillor Dwelly.
Thank you. I assume we are standing up, aren't we? Is it a choice?
There is a choice.
A choice. I'll stand for now. Thank you very much. Can I ask Councillor Toms and McGowan, could you please give us all an update on whether the airport situation will come in front of the Audit Committee? In particular, I'm referring to the fact there have been no valuations done of any of the sites there, and also the percentage ownership that Cornwall Council might be entering into with a third party, which I won't name. Are these things, are these matters that the Audit Committee could look at, and if so, how might that process be triggered? Thank you.
Councillor Toms.
Thank you, Councillor Dwelly. The process would be that it would come from a recommendation from a scrutiny committee, and it would come to us. We would, of course, then get the officers, or the officers would look at it, and then we would send any information that we had back to the committee. That's the normal process. Like I said, there are two functions, scrutiny and audit, and they're distinctly different. Thank you.
Councillor German.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Toms, thank you for the annual report. Thank you to the officers for the work that they've carried out and to your committee. As you said last year, you were concerned about the capacity of the audit team, a reduction in resource for carrying out the audit function. So you've talked about how important it is for all of us to be assured through audit. So how comfortable are you that the Audit Committee can do all of the work that it needs to do to assure full council that things are running smoothly? Thank you.
Councillor Toms.
I believe that the team that we've got are as strong as you can get. By number, they've done a great apprenticeship scheme for people coming into audit, and they've produced some now auditors for the team. You know, they've grown their own. Is the team big enough? That's up for discussion, and my own personal opinion is if we had another auditor, we would do more work and you would get more assurance across the council. But at the moment, I see, you know, across the council, there was a question yesterday at our briefing about all the new planning officers that we're going to get, and it said they're going to be 300 new planning officers for the country. That would mean one for Cornwall. You know, so it is going to reduce the workload for the others, marginally. But I would like to see at least one more auditor, because that would give us more capacity, because we've seen a slight increase in those issues that are of limited assurance. Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you. I will stand up. It's much more formal. I just wanted to say to the Chair and Vice Chair of Audit, and indeed the whole committee. I mean, I chaired this committee before you did, Councillor Toms. What an excellent job I think you do. And I want to concur in your praise of the internal audit team led by Holly Sykes. They are superb. But you guys guys and girls, I apologise, do a great job. And just an aside, Councillor Dwelly was asking about audit looking at the airport. And every question he was asking was one that surely Dev Scrutiny will be looking at a committee he sits on. So it seems to be rather a pointless question, but that's an observation.
Sorry, a quick response to that, if I may. It was simply asking how to refer these important matters, such as no valuations being done of the airport land, to audit. And we've had a very good answer, which I'm sure the committee will take on board. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to, if there's no more questions, we're going to go back to Councillor Toms. Would you like to sum up, or are you happy to go to the vote? Okay, the vote will now be opened. Please vote for, against, or abstain using the options on your microphone base.
10 seconds. Vote closed.
And that's carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item 10, motions. It is important, can I have some hush please? It is important for members to be aware that under Procedure Rule 12.4, any motions that have been moved and seconded stand referred to the relevant committee unless I exercise my discretion to allow the motion to be dealt with at the meeting at which it is brought forward, where it is considered to be convenient and conducive to the dispatch of business. I will confirm my decision on each of the motions at the relevant point in the agenda. 10.1, Fair Deal for Cornwall, proposer Councillor Martin, Councillor Toms. First of all, this motion and the appendix have been included in the agenda in the wrong way round. So my apologies for the administrative error. In accordance with the Procedure Rule 12.4, I am using my discretion to enable the motion to be debated. I will therefore ask Councillor Martin to move and Councillor Toms to second the motion set out on page 61 of the agenda pack. I've also agreed that Councillor Toms will be allowed an additional 3 minutes to speak. I will then bring in any of the supporters who wish to speak before opening up to the wider council for debate. Bearing in mind the level of interest in this motion, I would be grateful if members do not repeat points made by previous speakers. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. And at the risk of losing the support of my seconder, I'm going to sit down to do this, if that's okay. So this motion calls for the government to increase funding for all public services where Cornwall currently receives below the national per-person average. We all know in this chamber that Cornwall is one of the poorest parts of the UK with low wages and high housing costs. We know from the debate that we held last time that poverty, ill health and worklessness are a vicious cycle. But Cornwall Council receives £168 per dwelling below the England average. Increasing Cornwall's funding up to the England average would give the council an extra £47 million per year to fund core services such as social care, public health and road maintenance. The dedicated schools funding in Cornwall is £83 per pupil below the national average. Now, £83 doesn't sound like a huge amount, but altogether that's £5.7 million that our children are missing out on. And the high needs block that's used to support children with special educational needs and disabilities. Cornwall is number 142 out of 151 local authorities in terms of the funding it receives. If Cornwall received the national average, that will be worth an additional £15 million a year for our most vulnerable children. It goes right back to even early years. Cornwall is the joint lowest funded authority in the country for 3- and 4-year-old provisions, and in the bottom third for 2-year-old funding. If we were funded, again, just at the national average for all our early years entitlements, we'd get an extra £2.2 million a year. We know that spending money at the start of children's lives is the best possible investment that we can make in opening up opportunity. For children's social care, looking after our most vulnerable children in the most appalling circumstances, we're number 107 out of 125. If we receive the national median, that would be an extra £17 million. Just imagine how many extra social workers we could employ with that money. Public health is key to giving people the best start in life, overcoming addiction and avoiding long-term
30 seconds.
Education is key to raising productivity and wages. Everything we do, everything we spend helps people to live better lives. The last government won a huge majority after promising an agenda of levelling up, and the Conservatives won control of this council on the promise that they would secure a fair share of that funding for Cornwall. Sadly, that hasn't happened. Now we have a new government with an even bigger majority, but their manifesto focuses on restoring industrial heartlands, and it's clear that they don't intend to increase overall spending. So it's vital that we get our fair share, and I hope that we will all work together across parties to achieve this. Thank you.
Councillor Toms.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Why is this important? We've been asking for a fair deal for Cornwall since 2009 when we went unitary. And you look at specific points throughout those years, we've actually requested this a number of times, but we never really got it nailed down in the chamber and had it so that we can write to the government and say, these are the facts, let's know. You've heard from Colin about what it would mean to certain people, and if I said to members of the cabinet, you're going to receive 17 million extra for social care, you'd be jumping up and down. You'd be saying that is fantastic. You know, it would help us. But here are a few facts. Take highways. 2018-19, we spent £38 million. Last year, we spent £36 million. Drop of £2 million. Add in inflation over that period, you're talking that we should be spending £60 million. That's the impact of not being properly funded. Those little things that make the biggest difference to the people day in, day out. And when you look at how the country has been funded, and it's done through a thing called the Barnett formula, which I suppose all of you know, which was done years ago, and it makes Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland the 3 highest funded places. If we had their funding, we'd be £13 billion more in the Southwest budget. And for us, that would be about 0.9%. And that's what we would get extra. But you'll never get that because we're actually asking for the medium line of the average for England. So we're being reasonable, and our request is saying, what could we do with that money? We could do multiple things. It would help us in so many ways. And yet, you know, when I look at the population of the Southwest it's about 5.7 million people. Scotland, which gets 13 billion more, gets free social care, free prescriptions and things like that, yeah? Their population is 5.4 million pounds. So it's about 250,000, 300,000 more people living in the Southwest. you know, and we're not funding the same. Look at our bridge. We would all love our bridge and our ferry to be free, and could that be spent on this? You know, this money be spent on that? I think it's only the Conservative view of £43 million. I think it could be far in excess of that if the truth was known. When I tell you that because we get less funding, it has an impact, right? And if you look at Northumberland, rural area, very similar to Cornwall, all the rest of it, slightly smaller, yet their average house price is £187,000. Cornwall, well, flats are 166 on average, and houses, a detached house is £434,000. Rents, Northumberland, £586 per calendar month, whereas in Cornwall it's £791. You can see that actually Cornwall is far behind other places, and yet during the election, who was bleating the most? Scotland, we want more money. Wales, we want more money. And they get far more than us. There's not a bridge or a toll in Wales or Scotland because they're getting the extra money. Why aren't we getting it? And I think this is right and proper for this council to write and say, we're fed up with this, we're representing the people of Cornwall, and we want this extra funding because it will make an economic difference to highways, to children's, to social care, to all the things that are key and important to our population. And if we don't do this, and sign up to this, I think we're letting the people outside of this room down, because they're the key that put us here and support us saying to government, actually we want more money. And by the way, the Barnett formula needs to be scrapped and revamped because it's unfair, unjust, and like Colin said, Cornwall is one of the most deprived areas. You know, and we think we're bad in our deprivation. Look at Plymouth. The deprivation
30 seconds.
And that coastal edge, around the edge of the Tamar, terrible. You know, towards top 10%. You know, but there you are. Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me to have the extra time. Thank you.
First, please, can I ask any members listed as supporters of the motion to put their hands up if they wish to speak? Just keep your hand up just for a second so that my Vice Chairman can take your names. Okay, Councillor Bonney.
Thank you, Chair. And I hope this is a motion that is unanimously supported in the Chamber, and I sense it certainly will be. And I want to start my speech by saying I think Cornwall is the most amazing place in the world to be born, to grow up, and to stay living in. And I think we need to sell that picture and that message of an aspirational, innovative and hard-working Kernow. And I think the poor old us argument sometimes loses ears listening to us. But I also think we need to stop talking about Cornwall as purely a rural place. Vast parts of Cornwall are incredibly deprived. There's rural deprivation too, and we're also post-industrial. So those are part of the arguments that we need to put to government. And I think Cornwall is amazing despite the unfair funding. So if we look at what it actually means in practical terms, Each pupil is underfunded by £83 per year. What that means for every young person would be 8 hours of individual tuition from a teaching assistant. Those 8 hours, in terms of numeracy or literacy, could transform the opportunities for those young people. And I think we need to unleash Cornwall's potential. We need to show the hope and the opportunity that fair funding would deliver. We need to work together. We need to work with our 6 new MPs, who I am delighted have been elected. We need to work with a government that I believe has Cornwall's ear. The 1997 Labour government delivered Objective 1 funding for Cornwall. I hope we have the same transformational opportunity that they delivered in 1997. So new MPs and a new government, and to add to that, us, this merry band of councillors and brilliant council workers who have been working together for the last 3 years. And I think we need to feel that weight of responsibility. There is a huge challenge to press the government to achieve this. Let's not just complain like we have done for however many decades for fair funding. Let's actually deliver it in the next 4 years. So it requires a bespoke approach, positive, aspirational, and most importantly, cooperative. Let's be hopeful. Let's harness the collective political energy and will in Kernow. And it requires
30 seconds.
A steely focus to deliver fair funding, to deliver devolution, but where every single one of us in this chamber need to put Cornwall before political party. We absolutely have to work as one to deliver fair funding. And the question I want to pose to you is, are we really up for that challenge?
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take a slightly different tact, and I want to throw the phrase out, more for less, because that's what we actually do. We are the largest unitary authority in terms of geography, but we're one of the lowest in population density. And what that means is that, say, Bristol, for example, gets some money for an SEN school. They can build that school. Say they get £2.5 million. They can build that school. Those children are on their doorstep. They don't have to worry about transport costs and everything that goes on with that. Whereas in Cornwall, if we have enough money to build one SEN school, then that services the whole of Cornwall. We then have to think about how we're going to pay to get those children to those schools. And we have so many associated costs that go on with our sparse rural population that it's not just about actually getting our fair share. We should actually get a step up. But I'm happy to support this motion to make sure we actually get our fair share, because we're doing an incredible job actually doing more with less money than other places across the country. So please support this motion.
Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, being rather long in the tooth, I have been arguing that we need fair funding in Cornwall for a long time. And I do think everyone now recognises that we don't get a fair deal. We don't get a fair share of the central resources that come out. And as Councillor Thoms mentioned, rurality in some of the other nations of Britain means that they get a better deal under the model that exists. We need to be making the case not just that we need fair funding, but that we need fair funding that meets the needs of the young people and older people in Cornwall. I'm sitting on a standards working group at the moment looking at issues with SEND and issues that we're not dealing very well with delivering support to pupils with SEND. And the primary reason for that is not because our staff aren't good, not because they're not working really hard. It's because there's a lack of capacity and a lack of funding to enable those support structures to be put in place. It's something we need to urgently address, and I really think that everyone in this chamber should be working towards that. We need to be supporting the people of Cornwall, and particularly the young people of Cornwall, to be able to develop and innovate and be the best they can, as Cornwall has always done. Cornwall has historically been low funded, And because we were historically low funded, we are still low funded, because when you get percentage increases, it's not a percentage on very much. We need to turn that around and say, for Cornwall to be a thriving, modern, economic, innovative place for all our young people, working in STEM subjects, working on engineering, working on new technologies, we need to have fair funding. And that fair funding can be argued for very well between us as a Cornwall Council, all speaking with one voice and speaking with the MPs with one voice to make the case for Cornwall to be able to grow and thrive.
30 seconds.
Let's all work together, one and all, for that future.
Councillor Conway.
Thank you. I'll remain seated. I'm not particularly well known for behaving myself, so there we go. I'd just like to start by congratulating Jane Kirkham and Andrew George on your promotion. Very well done. And also our other 4 new MPs. With that, I would also like to thank very much the 6 MPs who are no longer our MPs for the service they have given over many years for this county. So thank you very much to them. Going to the motion. I'm supposed to be getting permission to support motions to support Cornwall. Well, I'm going to tell you it ain't going to happen. I will support Cornwall wherever and however I can. So let's look at what this motion is about. Fair funding for Cornwall. We cannot argue against fair funding for Cornwall. The only potential argument we can put is that Cornwall being deprived is entitled to a larger share of the cake than it currently gets. Our children, if they don't get the same amount of money to educate them, they're likely to not reach the same standard when they get their GCSE results, when they get their A-level results, send children and all the rest of it. If you haven't got the same money pumped into you to get to where you're going, you can't expect to reach the same standard. And it is wrong that Cornish children should be deprived of the same chance of a child in Bristol or a child in London or wherever. So we must push for fair funding for Cornwall and for our people. 3 years and 2 months this administration has had to push the Conservative government that was there to get fair funding. We haven't got it, so now we've got to push the new government. It's no use blaming what's going on. We must look to the future and carry on pushing forward and forward and forward for Cornwall to get its fair share of the cake. We cannot afford and we cannot allow our people to have less money than the rest of the country. And the last thing I'd just like to do is congratulate Armand on the stats you gave. Thank you very much. And Colonel Bisficken.
Councillor Marrington.
My comments sort of from being a new councillor, so 3 years, 2 months, and just how I've experienced things. And one of the things I can categorically say is over this time I've worked alongside really hard-working council officers who are doing their best. But what I also know is in the course of this last time, I've started to dread when people come up and ask me to do things because expectations are sort of there and you have to start from down here. And it's just something I've personally found really hard to understand. I don't know, I look at the figures, but I don't understand, but it just feels like some services have got to that point where almost they're barely functioning. And I'm sort of working in an area where I do have some of those really deprived wards, and I know one area recently that I was traipsing around was in the lowest 2% in England. So when I hear about Scotland and the north of England and London, you just think, why are we not hearing about Cornwall? So I hope that there'll be some change now and we can really start hearing about Cornwall up in London. People roll their eyes, obviously, when you're speaking to them and when you say there's no money. But, sorry, just lost my place. But our geography on its own seems to me to speak that we really have to find the money, because even that just on its own just seems like that's what is a big problem. But I was really shocked when I looked through these figures, particularly about the SEN ones, about how low we sat. And in the document, it says that education is key to raising productivity and wages. And education is so much more. I won't quote Blair, but it's just so important. Education should grow and nurture the next generation. The little phrase I used to use, because I come from an education background, is it's not about a life of tests, it's about the test of life. Children are our future, and for many, schooling may be their one safe space. So I found it quite upsetting that the children in Cornwall were treated so poorly here in terms of the finance that's there for them. There has to be equity. If there's no money for those who need it the most, then we really are in a sorry state. It feels like there can be no curiosity, and that's something I've also wondered when you're dealing with people working in SEND, social workers, that sort of area. It feels like we're right on that cusp of when things potentially can get dangerous as well, because if there's just no funding there, that curiosity has to be there to look at when we can solve problems sometimes. So Cornwall has to be listened to from my point of view. And I completely echo what Loveday said about speaking with one voice on this. Thank you.
Councillor George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, when I signed my support for this motion, I wasn't at that stage in a position to be on the receiving end of the message that it would present. So I'm grateful that I'm now, as I say, at that time, prior to the election, I hadn't anticipated that I would be in the position that I am in now, and it's an enormous privilege to receive the message from the council today. So I, in a sense, declare an interest. So being in a position to act on the message which the council will be sending, and will be working with local MPs, is something which I'm going to be obviously taking with great seriousness. And I know that when I was in Parliament before, there were a number of attempts to review the formula funds that affect Cornwall. This is something which is perennially the case. No one is going to be arguing for unfair funding, and certainly when you look at any formulas which produce an average, those locations that have funding above the average clearly don't campaign to receive less on the basis of fairness of funding, and we won't be alone in being those that are finding ourselves with a funding formula below the average that will be campaigning for more. And when you get into the detail, the methodologies used and the academic research which the multiple deprivation indices that go into the creation of these formulas is not simply a question of signing petitions and making an emotional case. As I think the officers provided very, very helpfully, the beginnings of the statistical case, which I think needs to be made in order for us to win the arguments to go forward. There's going to be some very hard work to be undertaken behind closed doors, and with some very erudite and academics and civil servants who will be cross-questioning and challenging the claims that we're making with regard to those indices not being sufficient.
30 seconds.
And certainly amongst those aspects which I'm very keen that we look at is of course seeking devolved power. So although Armand rightly says that the Barnett formula perhaps needs to be reviewed, I'd like us in Cornwall, our devolved status, to be seen at a level where we might be entitled to have a share of that Barnett formula itself. We need to have the latitude, I think, within Cornwall to be able to say to government, actually, that £400 million that went to holiday home owners through a tax loophole is money which we could spend on first homes rather than on second homes. Those are the kind of powers which we need to have, and those are the kind of powers which I shall work with the council and campaign for. Thank you very much.
Perhaps, Councillor George, we need an en masse councillors' coach trip to Westminster and a meeting with the new government and our 6 MPs, and then you can buy us lunch. How about that? Councillor Rogerson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Rich is before me, I think, according to the list.
It's not in list order.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to sum up because most people have already said what I intended saying, and I'm terrified of incurring your wrath about repetition. I just wanted to say that this motion, along with the leader's letter, thank you, Councillor Taylor, could well kick-start a new era of cooperation which can only benefit the people of Cornwall and its mission to help us start well, live well and age well. So I hope, as I say, what I wanted to say has been said very eloquently already, but I hope whatever our politics, we can get behind this motion and the leader's letter, because the last thing I would want is for this new government to believe that we are divided over this vital need for Cornwall. This vote is actually a vote for our children and young people and their needs and what they can offer to the future of the Duchy. So this is a vote for them. And thank you for being here today. It's lovely to see you and congratulations on your elections too. So please vote for this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to echo what Councillor Conway said, to congratulate the new MPs, but also to thank the outgoing 6 MPs as well for their work for Cornwall. I understand that in Cornwall, per person, we actually give more to charity than anywhere else in the country. So, we're not, this is not just about wanting things. We might be one of the most poorly paid areas in the UK and Europe, but we also give the most as well, where we can. What we do have, we give. This is about what we can give to the UK, Madam Chair, and what we can contribute. And the best way to contribute is to invest in our future and invest in our children, as Councillor Rogers said.
Thank you. So please, if there's any other members that would like to speak, raise their hand now and hold their hand up until my Vice Chairman has taken the names. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Not wanting to incur your wrath, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I welcome the motion from Councillor Colin Martin. It's absolutely building on the words from David Harris, Councillor David Harris, when he has spoken about the pressure on budgets. It absolutely supports the letter that has gone, as it's been referred to, that I sent to the to the Prime Minister. It's really important that we do stand united in this particular issue, and I will be supporting the motion. The start well, live well and age well is important to everyone, I believe, in this chamber. The children are our future, and we must ensure that they have a future to enjoy, to grow and to prosper. But it isn't obviously just about children. It's about making sure that our voice is heard, and if we are united, I absolutely welcome that position. The sterling words from Councillor Bunny, I thought he was going to get us up waving our flags, but thank you for that. And if at the end of today, this motion is hopefully perhaps fully supported, for me, that's a really good step towards making sure our voices are heard. We're all acting together for the best interest of our residents in Cornwall. And I believe that's what every single person in this chamber wants to achieve. Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Taylor's been reading my notes. Councillor Martin, I never thought I'd be standing up here saying thank you, well done, wonderful motion, but that's exactly what I'm saying. To slightly echo what Councillor Taylor said, we've been pushing for this and making the point and writing. I made the point very strongly after the last budget that in 2 or 3 years' time we'd be up the creek without a what's it, etc. So anything we can do now as a joint council, brilliant. As Linda already said, she's written to the Prime Minister. Councillor Frost made an absolutely excellent point about our rurality. Bristol gets £2 million for a new school. Wonderful. They all live within 10 miles of it. We get £2 million for a new school, and the adult, the children's transport bill goes up by £5 million. Councillor Thomas mentioned the Barnett formula, which came in about 1978 and suggested it should be gotten rid of. I just looked this up. In 1998 and 2014, Lord Barnett, as he then was, described the Barnett formula as a terrible mistake, an embarrassment, and completely unsuitable. We perhaps should remind government of this when they're looking at things. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, there is absolutely nothing to disagree with this motion at all, and I will be supporting it. But I really do wonder whether we are going in this direction in the right way, because I've sat here and listened to these sort of comments many times, and even before I became a councillor, it was known to me that people perceived Cornwall as always asking and perhaps begging for stuff, perhaps in the way that Councillor Bunny was slightly hinting at when he spoke. And I really feel that we need to adopt a different tactic here. And we really need to work with the other parts of the United Kingdom who can see and agree with us that the formula system does not work. We've got this data here in front of us. We can see that places like Yorkshire and Humber and the East Midlands have got an equal case. Why are we not working with their mayors? Why are we not working with their leaders and actually arguing that something needs to be done? And although this is incredibly political, it isn't, because we can actually produce data. We can actually tell people who come to Cornwall, our visitors, that they're entering an area where there is great inequality. We can show that data, and perhaps these can be Cornwall Council statements rather than assigned to a political party. And there is a degree of irony here in the things we're talking about. I'm really pleased to hear that behind the scenes, Councillor George is saying that these things will happen behind closed doors, or that was the impression. It shouldn't be. We should be out there. We should be working with all other councils and areas in the United Kingdom who feel that things are wrong. Because, unfortunately, although we consider and believe this is a wonderful place to live, and I fully agree with that, people do not realise and do not know the situation that we're in. How many people, how many of your residents understand that we live in the second poorest part of geographical Europe? How many residents are aware of the data that we've been presented with this afternoon? We need to present this to the people of Cornwall so that they are aware of the facts. And we must work together, not as political parties, but as members of this community. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Le Broy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of the points I'm going to make were already been said, so I'll make them as quick as I possibly can, but I thoroughly agree with my colleague, Councillor Thomas. We shouldn't be going with a begging bowl saying, please give us more. We should be knocking on the doors and saying, just give us our fair share. And I think everyone in this council chamber has heard this argument probably several times over. We as people are educated. We know what the problems are. But I wouldn't mind betting if you went to the average person on the street in Cornwall, they probably wouldn't know the fact that we're funded in a very, very unfair way. I think it's absolutely something that everyone in the chamber should be supporting. And I think it's in the public interest that people will want to see their councillors and their representatives supporting this fair deal that we're asking for. We're not asking for anything special, just fairness. So to that event, can I request that we have a recorded vote?
Do you have a seconder? Okay, we're going to do a recorded vote by standing. So if you agree that it should be a recorded vote, please stand. Yes, that's carried. Thank you very much. You can all sit down. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I fully support this motion as well and have done for many years. Rural deprivation is one of our biggest problems. We have travel costs and also the problems of isolation from rural areas. We also have urban deprivation. In Madrid, the only banks we have are food banks. The area is also post-mining, a long way away from that now, but it still hurts. And we are a long way here in Cornwall from the markets, and we need better connections for that. The fishing fleets were let down by Brexit, and we really need to stop exporting our youngsters to England and beyond. Tourism has a role to play, but it is not 100% of the year, and you can't live on views. Low investment directly leads to lower pay, which leads directly to poverty. It is not rocket science. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wills.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to congratulate all the new MPs that have been elected and the two Cornwall councillors, of course, Councillor Kirkham and Councillor George, along with all of us here in this chamber. And I hope they will devote all of their time to Westminster and stand down and allow by-elections to happen at the earliest opportunity. I, of course, along, I think, with everybody in this chamber, fully support this motion. For far too long, all of us in Cornwall have been let down by successive governments who have failed to properly fund local authorities. And I sincerely hope that the new Deputy Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, Angela Rayner, will take full note that when we vote momentarily on this motion, I'm sure we will all support it, that a fairer funding for all local authorities should be at the top of her agenda and the new government's agenda. We are, as we've heard, in one of the poorest regions and counties in the country, so we must continue to fight for better funding for all our services that we provide here at Cornwall Council, and we must try and stop putting the burden on Cornish taxpayers through the unfair raising of council tax year in, year out. Since I've been on this council, my council tax at home has gone up by nearly £80 a month in 7 years, because each year we put it up to the maximum of just below 5% by 0.01 point, and that is a huge burden upon many families here in Cornwall, and it's only right if central government can send billions of pounds abroad to other places, they should be sending it to local authorities so that we can fund our services properly, look after our infrastructure and make sure that our young people have a future. And I fully support this motion, and I'm pleased and I hope that everyone in this chamber will do the same. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to completely support this motion. It's just absolute common sense. But I would just sort of, I agree with, two very sensible councillors on the opposition, Councillor LeBroy and Councillor Thomas, that we need a slightly different approach. Just making the deprivation argument is not enough. We know it's not enough because that argument hasn't worked. As Councillor George said, this is all going to be thrashed out by civil servants behind closed doors. They are the same civil servants that have been in post for the last 30 years, despite changes of government. So that's where it's going to be decided. So we've got to make the case slightly differently. If you just say we're deprived, the wrong word. If we just say we're deprived, there's always somebody worse off than you. There's always an inner city a state that's worse off than you, that someone can pluck from the air and say, well, they're worse off and they're worse off and they're worse off. It's not enough. We have to talk about Cornwall's uniqueness. What makes us unique? What makes us have to drive the argument? Councillor Frost talked about the SEND school. Well, how about the fact it costs 10% more to build that SEND school in Cornwall than it costs to build it in Plymouth? That is a fact. That's what capital projects cost in Cornwall. How about the fact that our average petrol price at the pump is 5 pence a litre more than it is in Scotland? That is not based on distance. That is based on the tourism market, because petrol in Newquay at the moment is more expensive than petrol in Penzance, which is further away from the refinery. So it can't be based on distance. It's based on opportunity. How about the fact that our children, on average, have to travel further to find a school than most other places in the UK? Those are the things we need to be arguing about. Those need to be added to the deprivation argument. We cannot just say the argument, oh, woe is me, because there's always somebody worse. It's Cornwall's uniqueness in this circumstance which has to add to this argument and make the case, because we need to make it differently, because it hasn't worked so far.
Councillor Ellenbrook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to address some of the points that have been made about education, and very specifically to remind everybody that there is an organisation called the F40. That is an organisation of councils throughout England who are all poorly funded, certainly for their education. Cornwall Council is a member of that group. If anybody wants to get their regular newsletters, just let me know. And I would remind all our new MPs that F40 wrote to every single prospective parliamentary candidate in places that are members of F40 to advise them of the very important problems that we have in terms of poor funding. So I would ask, please, that that message is very firmly taken back to Westminster. You know what the story is. What I would like to say, though, is despite the fact that our funding for children's services, and that includes education in Cornwall, is poor, and we all know the statistics, one of the things that we're not poor at is actually delivering service. And I would like to stand here today and acknowledge and thank the members of the Together for Families team who work incredibly hard for all our young people and all of our families, because they care about what happens to them. So we have also, as well as a council, chosen to spend extra money that we have been given through the budget process to make sure that we have good quality family hubs. The latest one I attended the opening for in Penzance is absolutely brilliant. That is where our young people and our young families actually start to engage with us and are supported by us. So obviously I support the motion. Why wouldn't any of us support it? But I do think we also need to acknowledge, as I say, certainly in children's services, how very much better off our children are in Cornwall, despite the not so good funding, because we have an
30 seconds
team who work for our children and families in Cornwall.
Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is an ongoing thing for many years. When I sat on North Cornwall District Council, we were always fighting Cornwall Council, or Cornwall County Council as one then, for more funding. Councillor Bunny mentioned Objective 1 funding. Yes, we did get a lot of money into Cornwall, but 75% went west to Truro. Very little came to North Cornwall and East Cornwall. And that's a fact, Councillor Bunny, because that came from, North Cornwall is very underfunded. SPF funding, nobody's fault, but because when I saw Councillor Broy's hand go up, I thought he might mention this. But with the SPF funding, we only got 2%. We were the lowest because we're very rural. Our population is very low compared to anyone else's. We want fairer funding for Cornwall. I totally support it, 100%. But I would like to see more fairer funding for North and East Cornwall as well, because we're the most rural and we get the less funding. I have just approved a £1,000 grant from my community chest for Sir James Smith School in Camelford, so they can do a project with a big piece of land they've got to get children outside in the open air working. 2/3 of my community chest has gone to schools this year and every year. Our area is underfunded greatly, and we need more money in North Cornwall and no doubt East Cornwall as well. So if we're going to get better funding for Cornwall, I want better funding for North Cornwall as well. Thank you.
Councillor Worth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to say and make this point, particularly to the children in the room. One of the challenges we've got in this debate that we've heard is how people move around. It's change. So I'm very conscious that this is my first speech from a cabinet seat, but I'm proud to be able to make it from the point of view of saying it would make no difference to me if I was sat there or sat here. And I'm going to echo the comments made by Councillor Jordan here in the way that Councillor Toms mentioned. You mentioned the bridge and the tolls and the ferry and the crossings, but I also want to make certain that the first mention I've made from a cabinet position is also based around the importance of the Safer 38 and how we have to focus on that area of South East Cornwall in particular to protect our residents. So I'm very conscious about moving in this case, and that's the key. Where we look at now, we've got to deal with not only new MPs, but we've got to deal with those members of Westminster, those civil servants who will be getting those demands from across the country, from all areas, but we've got to make Cornwall's voice special. I'm sure we can in coming together, which clearly I'll be supporting this motion, but my effort will be particularly focused on the interest in this case of South East Cornwall and Tamer Crossings and the Safe 38. Thank you.
Thank you. There's been no more speakers. I'm going to go back to Councillor Martin, who has a right. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I did put my hand up. It's been mentioned that Cornwall is recognised as one of the poorest areas in Europe. The people that probably recognise that more than anybody were the European Union, who gave Cornwall 1/10 of all the money that came into this country. More than Scotland, more than Northern Ireland, more than any county in England. Only Wales got slightly more. The Conservative Party at the time, I can't remember who was the leader, there's been so many, I presume it was Boris Johnson, dragged us out of Europe and said that they would replace all the money that was coming into us from the EU. They haven't done that, they've got nowhere near doing that. And a lot of people have been disenfranchised. These young people at the back have been disenfranchised by that. The Conservative Party must recognise what's happened, and I hope and know that Andrew and Jane, when they get into Parliament and get swinging, they will look to reverse that decision, I hope, and take us back to our colleagues in Europe. Thank you.
And our final speaker is Councillor Mustoe.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And I applaud the sentiment behind this motion, and of course we'll be fully supporting it, as well as the very valid reasons given for supporting this motion, the high levels of deprivation in some areas of Cornwall and the sparsity and rural geography of our duchy. I wanted to highlight another element that sometimes goes overlooked, that the nature of our geography as a peninsula surrounded on 3 sides by the sea means that unlike many other rural councils or councils with high levels of deprivation, we cannot work with neighbouring authorities or organisations such as the NHS in much of Cornwall to share services, pool resources or otherwise better deliver services. Authorities such as those in Surrey, for example, can look to immediate neighbours on all sides to help in this nature, whereas in Cornwall we cannot. I think that's just one more thing to consider to make an argument for Cornwall's unique and special place, and one I look forward to seeing made. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go over to Councillor Martin. Is there anything you would like to say to sum up?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try and sum best as I can. Picking up probably one point from most speakers, but I'm going to start with 2 points that Councillor Wills raised. He's absolutely right. Across the whole country, there needs to be more funding for councils. And he's also absolutely right that in some councils, the starting point of council tax is much higher than in others. And so every time it goes up 5%, that's a bigger burden here than it is elsewhere. But this is, it's not just about overall funding, it's about us getting our fair share. As Councillor Thoms pointed out, it's not just council funding, it's all government funding where we're missing out. Councillor Bunny, absolutely right. We mustn't just say this is poor old us. It's a positive vision about what we can do. Councillor Ellenbrook, yeah, we're already, our fantastic staff are already going above and beyond, getting more than could be expected from the amount of limited funding that they're giving us. Imagine how much more they could do if we actually got our fair share. Councillor Frost talked about the extra costs related to rurality, and that goes with what Councillor Mustoe was saying about being surrounded on three sides. Every service we provide costs more. Councillor Barnes and Councillor Worth, you're right, it's not just the cost of delivering services, it's the cost of everything anybody does. And that's not just a financial cost as well. It's that cost that getting home after work from Plymouth takes half an hour longer than it should because there's yet another closure on the bridge. And if that means that that parent getting home then doesn't have time to read to their child before they go to bed, then that child is missing out on that really important help with their own literacy. Councillor Jenkin, you talked about the lack of capacity for SEND, and crucially, if we start behind, every time the government increases funding by a certain percentage, that means that gap gets bigger by that same percentage. Councillor Conway, underfunding education deprives our children of a fair chance in life. Absolutely right. Councillor Marrington, as we've said from Councillor Ellenbrook's comment, our officers are doing the best they can, but they're in impossible circumstances. Councillor George, the powers to control things which don't seem like a big deal across the UK, the government's like, why are people bothered about a tourism tax? That's not a big deal. But if we had the freedom to do the things that are right for our community, it would make a really big difference here. So it's not just about money, it's about more flexibility. 3 different councillors said it's about not just asking for a handout. This is not just about saying the government should pass a Fair Funding for Cornwall Act, which just gives us a special line in every budget, because let's be honest, there's 644 MPs who wouldn't be interested in supporting that. So what we need to do is work with like-minded colleagues from across the country where they've got similar issues, that we need to be making that argument for every single line of every single formula to be changed. And if they're all made fairer, we should be the biggest beneficiaries of it. Councillor Mitchell is correct to point out that we were promised we wouldn't lose a penny of our structural funding, and he's absolutely right. We do need to see a commitment for a replacement of the Shared Prosperity Fund, but also to make sure that Cornwall gets its fair share of that fund. Most of all, we need to get away from this spreadsheet mentality of civil servants and ministers in Whitehall. When they look at what gives them the biggest return on their investment, if a new road is going to boost local employment by 5%, the spreadsheet tells you to build it in the place that had the most jobs to begin with. If a new college would boost productivity by 5%, the spreadsheet tells you to build it in the place where wages were already the highest. And if better broadband boosts household productivity by £100, the spreadsheet tells you to roll it out in the places where the most houses are closest together. I'm nearly there. So that's why we need our MPs to challenge every single line in every single department from every formula. And Councillor Jordan is right to point out that this logic applies to the way that we share out our funding within Cornwall as well. Councillor Rogerson, we must present a united face to government on behalf of our young people. Councillor Rich, we are a generous community. We're not asking for a handout, we're asking for a hand up. Councillor Harris, every time you speak, you say, I'm going to make an exception here and agree with Councillor Martin. And finally, Councillor Taylor, this motion counts on you to take our voice forward, so it's great to hear that you stand ready to do so wholeheartedly. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. You did notice my eyes burning into you then, didn't you? Well done. Okay, so we're now going to open the vote. So please vote for, against, abstain using the options on your microphone base.
10 seconds. It looks like that's finished.
Are we all done?
Yep, vote closed.
And that looks like it's a unanimous vote, so well done, everybody. So we're going to stop for lunch, and I am going to be very prompt at starting the meeting again at 1:15. So you've got till 1:15 and I want you back in your seats. Thank you. hour. I'm just going to bring in Councillor Harris because he wants to give an update.
Councillor Harris is giving an update.
Quite full. Thank you, Chair. I said this morning in relation to a question on headroom numbers, etc., that figures would be out with the Q1 numbers that were going to Cabinet. Where I went wrong was anticipating when they went to Cabinet. They'll be going to Cabinet in September, not next week. So I wanted to make it clear so I couldn't be accused of misleading people. I apologise. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now going to start our hour of question from members to members of the Cabinet. Agenda item 11. Members will be aware that Council agreed that a period of 60 minutes be allocated for questions from members to the Cabinet. Members are not required to give advance notice of their questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question, if you wish to ask, so that my Vice Chairman can make a note of your names. Please keep your hand up until Vice Chairman has everyone's name to make sure that we don't miss anybody. Each member must identify the Cabinet member their question is for, and they will be able to ask one supplementary question based on the original question or response. In accordance with the Council's decision in January 2023 on supplementary questions, any member wishing to put a supplementary has 30 seconds to do so. Questions should relate to the duties of the Council and the specific remits of the Cabinet portfolios. I would ask that questions and responses are kept as brief as possible so that as many members as possible have the opportunity to ask their questions. I would also appreciate it if, as far as possible, members refrain from asking parochial questions, as these can be dealt with more appropriately outside the meeting. Any questions that cannot be dealt with during the 60 minutes can, of course, be raised with the Cabinet member outside the meeting. Okay. Councillor Mustoe.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question to Councillor Veer, and this is regarding a establishment in Councillor German's division, but I have asked Councillor German about it, and he's fine for me to ask it. And this is something that's been raised with me by a number of families of residents and staff who live in my division. But following the decision of Roseland Court Care Home in Tregony to close its doors, can he outline what actions Cornwall Council are taking to look after the residents who are currently there, needing care, and staff needing jobs? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Mustoe, for the question. This is always difficult when we get notification of a care home that closes. And I want to first thank my team who have been working tirelessly to support the care home to ensure that the residents and staff are primarily looked after. So the actions that are being taken, we're meeting with the care home operators twice a week and supporting them. There are a mixture of residents there who are funded both their own finances through the NHS and a small number through Cornwall Council social care funding. We are working with other operators to find alternative close by nursing homes, and we will work with the staff who require new jobs. There are plenty of roles within adult social care within the county. So just to underline, this is always difficult, and it's not the outcome that you would want if you're a resident or their families. It's distressing, so we're really proactive with the teams on the ground. I would note that when this has happened previously, often this has led to improvements in care homes when we brought new suppliers in to sometimes care homes that are on shaky grounds. And so, again, I pay tribute to the staff and their actions to ensure the best outcomes for the residents. Thank you for asking the question.
Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary?
No, I don't, thanks.
Councillor Barnes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm not quite sure who this should be directed to. My question is, why won't you let the issue of Newquay Airport go to a scrutiny committee? What have you got to hide?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Councillor Barnes. Why don't we let it go to scrutiny committee? Well, it's been 3 times to a scrutiny committee. Formally, it's been twice informally to a scrutiny committee, and it is due to go back to ECDEV in September before it goes to Cabinet in October. So it's been 5 times, it's due to go once more. There you go.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes. Why is it that members still feel disenfranchised when you say things like that?
I don't know.
I believe that one.
Councillor Wells.
Thank you. My question, I think, is to Councillor Williams-Pears, although Councillor Harris, responsible for resources, may also want to answer. This is in relation to the Moorfield car park in Truro. Although it's in my division, it does affect the wider Truro area at the very least. And the sudden closure of most of the decks on the car park has caused considerable problems in Truro, and of course we're in the middle of the season and we're likely to have increasing problems, particularly on a wet Wednesday in August. My question really relates to reassurance, particularly to the businesses and traders of Truro, that an urgent solution is being sought to ensure that we keep the parking provision in the city centre. Although we have got the park and ride, it's not the same time parking in the centre of Truro.
Councillor Williams-Pears.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, well, what can I say? We weren't expecting the changes we've had to make at Moorfield. Obviously, it's been declared as unsafe to operate at the moment. We're looking into that. We're working on it. We're working with our consultants and our teams on that. Looking at the occupancy rates of it, we're allowing people to park in the external part of the car park that isn't under the multi-storey. And when you look at the standard occupancy of the car park, that actually does allow us to maintain quite significant amount of parking there. This is something we're looking at, we're working on at the moment. But frankly, while it's unsafe to park in there, we can't operate it. We're looking at ways forward, and we'll make a decision when we've got more info on that. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Question, I think it's for Councillor Olvey. The new car park with the solar panels, I think we're all really looking forward to seeing that open. It's a really good project, wonderful thing for us to be doing. But my question is, why on earth is it taking so long to build it? Work started before Christmas. It doesn't look like a lot. I mean, they're digging trenches and things and laying cables, but I just cannot believe it's taken this long to get to that stage. So when will it be completed? And also, how much is it costing? It must be costing a fortune. Is there a if it has been delayed, then if it's gone over budget, have we got, in our contract, do we pay like a set fee, or will we have to pay extra, or what? So I'd be very grateful for answers to all of those. Thank you.
Councillor Alvey, is that you?
I'm doing a swivel to Councillor Harris because this is property uses.
Okay, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. It's a question I asked only yesterday. And I'm looking at the schedule I've been sent. I can't give you numbers. I'll come back to you on numbers. I'm not sure it started before Christmas either. They've had problems with finding cables and stuff, etc., underground, which has delayed it. Final delivery date now is handover to client about the 23rd of September. And I will come and I will try and get details on whether we are on. I don't think you put your hand up, Councillor German. If Councillor Rich wants to ask a supplementary, please feel free. Supplementary, Councillor
Well, have you got a supplementary, Councillor Rich?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, what year, indeed. But
thank you for your question, Councillor Rich. Yeah. 2024, of course.
Would the portfolio holder agree with me? I appreciate neither of us experts. Would you agree with me that that's an extraordinarily long time for something that would appear on the surface to be quite straightforward?
Like I said, I asked the same question yesterday, and the answer I got was they had real problems with cables underneath the car park. I will ask more questions because I'll be frank, it does seem like a long time to me.
Councillor Broy.
Thank you. My question is for Councillor Williams-Pears. And firstly, thank you very much indeed for engaging with the community of Bude in putting off the closure of Crooklets Beach car park, which was actually going to be resurfaced this week, which seemed to be a crazy decision, given the fact they were actually hoping to get a few tourists parking up there and spending a few quid on our beaches. But anyway, given that I've heard rumours of potential devolution to third-party companies to run some of our car parks in Cornwall, can we seek some sort of assurance that local parish councils will be at least offered
an option, maybe even the first option, on managing these vital assets for Cornwall.
Councillor Williams-Pearce.
Thank you, Councillor. Firstly, on Crooklet's Beach, I think that's probably a very good example of us delivering what you want, but not necessarily when you want it. And you and other councillors reached out, and we were able to move the date on that, which hopefully will make things better for absolutely everybody. So again, I would always say to anybody, if you have an issue or you have a problem, best not to wait to full council. Send us an email, and we'll see what we can do in the meantime. With regard to devolution, yes, that's certainly something that we look at. Whenever we devolve to local councils, we consider a package usually where we try to sort of balance the assets, the liabilities, and aim to bring the whole thing in so that it's cost neutral. And so that's something I know that we spend a lot of time with local councils trying to work out. Simply giving away a car park can cause a significant budget hole in certain circumstances. But yes, in every instance, ask us, we'll look into it. I'm aware of several others that we are looking into. So yeah, flag that one up with us and we'll see what we can do. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary?
Indeed I do. So when I was growing up, Chair, in sunny Bude, my parents owned a beach car park. It was actually Widmouth Bay, 3 miles south of Bude, and I stood on the box for a couple of years as a schoolboy and taking the 50p off every car. My own father described it as a licence to print money. So my question that, given that Cornwall Council doesn't seem able to manage these relatively simple businesses, would the portfolio holder agree with me that this is a demonstration of a failure of our own management?
Councillor Williams-Pearce.
I think you've touched on an issue that a lot of us do feel. I mean, as you can see, there have been several sort of changes and reorganisations of the car parks over the last few years. I know Councillor Donathorne changed the pricing structures, and that's actually something that, from my email last week, we've been, as you can see, we're investigating what we can do there with ANPR car park tolling. I think, quite frankly, the costs for a lot of these things have changed. It's not economical to have someone standing in the front taking 50p. So how do you ensure that people pay for the parking as they should, and that everything is managed properly? That's something we're looking at right now. That's part of the reason for my email to you all last week. We're looking at it, we're investigating it, and we'll look at all options. Thank you.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before I ask my question, just quickly to say thank you to everyone that has supported me in my Great North Run fundraising. I really appreciate it from everyone across the chamber. My question is for Councillor Gardner. Can the Cabinet member confirm whether he has written to the former Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive criticising the new Chamber Chief Executive for his statement on the disposal of the airport, and has he received a reply?
Councillor Gardner.
Have I exchanged emails with the former Chair of the Chamber of Commerce? Yes.
Specifically criticising the new Chief Exec for his statement on the disposal of the airport?
That's between me and the current Chair, thanks. The current Chief Exec.
Do you have a supplementary?
Do you feel this action that you cannot confirm is between you and the former Chief Exec brings a reputational harm to this council?
What I would say is I would refer you to the press release that went out yesterday. That was a joint press release between myself and John Brown, the new Chair of the Chamber of Commerce. Everything that's happened in the last 10 days since the Chamber of Commerce's press release, which was sent 4 days to the press, sent to the press 4 days before it was sent to me or other members of the council. Everything since then has been really constructive. The Chamber of Commerce were involved with the Economic Forum discussion, their representation. There was also Chamber of Commerce representation at the Airport Consultative Forum, and I've pledged to actually go and visit the entire board from the Chamber of Commerce. And I thank the Chamber of Commerce. I'm at a dinner with them this evening, including both the former chair and the current, the former chief exec and the current chief exec, and we keep working towards that relationship.
Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question is for the portfolio holder, Carol Moll, for waste. In January, the decision was taken to exclude receiving household do-it-yourself waste at Conan Bridge HWRC and actually other centres. The consequences has seen many, many issues of fly tipping of those waste materials in the countryside. We were told this exclusion was a trial and that a review would be within 6 months. It has now been almost 8 months. Please can you confirm when this decision is being reviewed and if the local members will be consulted? Thank you.
Councillor Mould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your question. Yes, we have conducted a 6-month trial and that has come to an end. We will have those results by the end of July when we will be consulting all local members before we publicise it. And one thing I would say is if you do have evidence of fly tippings in that period of time, then I hope it has all been logged with the waste team and photographic evidence where possible so we can have a clear view of what's been going on. Thank you very much.
Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Rushworth.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, my question is to Councillor Alvery. You've had 3 climate change questions today, which you've answered, and I would admit that they were replies, the answers you gave were probably based on information that's several years old now. More and more scientists are coming out in favour of the bigger part that natural variability is playing within the climate and questioning the hypothesis of CO2. I sent you some information which clearly states, and it's taken from data that NASA and NOAA use, and so the IPCC use, that all of the warming in the last 120 years' time has come in the night time and not during the day. So could you tell me your thoughts on that, and do you think that because it's happening this way, it's down to CO2? And the other thing is, on the other 2 questions, it's quite simple to say back to these people. If we went to a plant-based diet and all meat products and all meat and dairy products we stopped using them, wouldn't that mean we'd need a lot more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for all these plants to breathe on?
Councillor Alvery.
Stephen, I think your algorithms on your Twitter feed are really feeding you some duff information. But I would say that what you say, basically, yes, there's probably 10% of climate scientists are siding with you on this. The majority of the science says that this is man-made. In terms of CO2 and requirement for plants, I'm surprised that you're not bright enough to understand the balance of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Do you have a supplementary?
No, but I have a response, if I may. I do not just take algorithms. I spend hours and hours, and I have for the last 20 years, reading papers, peer-reviewed papers from both sides of the argument, okay? And I'm not taking algorithms, everything. There is a genuine, now, rethinking of the economy, probably due to all the costs that are being impaired on all the people in the world who cannot afford to pay for those costs. And
time.
You should take some time, read the papers, and do a bit of climate thinking instead of just not hearing what you're listening to the rhetoric.
Councillor Alvery.
I don't think there was a supplementary question in there, but you know my view, and I respect yours. Don't agree with you, though.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's to Councillor Pears-Williams. Councillor Pears-Williams, you have authorised a bid to the Community Infrastructure Levy for something like £2.1 million to help to bail out rail track. Could you explain why, sir?
Councillor Williams-Pearce.
To give you more clarity, sir? It's in the papers that was... Perhaps I can make it...
Yeah, perhaps you could clarify. We're a little unsure of what you mean.
You put in a bid for the Strategic Levy Fund for £2.1 million to help to bail out rail track for the completion of a bridge that they're building over the railway line at Nansledden. And this was a costed project, and presumably rail track, in actual fact, even though the bells and whistles were required by the Duchy of Cornwall. Surely we shouldn't be the ones to be funding it ourselves, given that it was a grossly extravagant price for a simple railway bridge. 23 million pounds was the quoted price.
I think perhaps the way you're phrasing it is I think we now know what you're referring to, but it might be better if you could put that in an email to me and we can get you a written answer.
Well, no, I would prefer to ask you, sir, because you must be aware of it, because you're the portfolio member for transport, and you would have been part of the parcel of, in actual fact, agreeing for this to go to the strategic fund. This is a fund, as you know, which is set aside for projects. And I just can't understand why we're bailing out a bridge that the Duchy of Cornwall have specified the design for, which is obviously grossly extravagated the price.
30 seconds.
Well,
it's only because he's not answering me, madam.
Well, I've offered you a written answer. It's actually a quite complicated matter because we've made a bid to get the costs from central government. So it's the way you're phrasing it is making it quite difficult to actually figure out which bits you're talking about and which bits you want. Look, I'll give you a full written answer. That'd probably be a lot easier.
Okay, and if I can then do my secondary, because I was only asking him,
yes.
Do you feel that this bid by Railtrack for you to subsidise them is foreboding for what will happen when the metric rail project steams into fruition? How many more bids are you likely to expect coming your way? Thank you, sir.
Councillor Williams-Pearce.
Well, Mid-Cornwall Metro, again, is a very different project. That's actually, again, largely funded centrally. I mean, you're talking about 50 million from central government and 2 million or 2 and a bit million from us. So, again, that's already something that is a bid and has been funded. So it's a very different kettle of fish. Again, if you can explain your first question a bit better in an email, we'll be happy to send you a full response. Thank you.
I apologise, I wasn't clear enough.
Councillor Conway.
Sorry, I'll wake up and listen better next time. Regarding the 30 car parks that are supposed to be being disposed of, why is it that it didn't come through the normal channels and it's come more as a surprise to councillors? Why is it that Cornwall Council have merely not employed more enforcement staff in these car parks to ensure that people who are parking there pay? It's a known fact that the enforcement people bring in fines or whatever for not paying considerably more than they get in than it costs to pay them. So it makes sense just to put them forward. Why is it thought to be cheaper to continue with the same fees for the car park, but to employ someone privately to do it, who's going to make money purely out of the fees? I accept the Newquay car park that's quoted has its own particular problems, and it doesn't come within the general ambit. And the last question on this is, why do you not offer these car parks to town and parish councils who could run them a damn sight more efficiently?
Okay, Councillor Williams-Pearce.
Thank you. Yeah, again, the reason this has come about and the way it's come about is it was something we're investigating, we were looking at. We'd started it with the car park in Newquay to address specific issues. Then we're looking at another car park to test the concept and see where it goes. We then got an email from Tim Dwelly saying that he was aware that this was going on and wanted more information. So we sort of find ourselves in the middle of attempting to find a better way of doing things, and we're getting a lot of questions before we've got the answers, really. The reason we're doing this is that, quite frankly, technology has moved forward. As was said a few minutes ago, car parks in the right areas and at the right times can be a license to print money. However, Cornwall Council... Well, I didn't turn it off. I haven't touched it. Cornwall Council actually lost money on car parking last year. That's why there's been a lot of work done on trying to change the way things are done. I feel that bringing in new technologies such as ANPR allows us to run things an awful lot more efficiently, an awful lot better. You were asking why we can't recruit more parking wardens. Again, we struggle to find them. A lot of people don't want to do the job. And when you look at it holistically and around the world, you see that the vast majority of car parks have installed ANPR cameras because it deals with this problem very succinctly. I have been asked about how the private companies can run things better, and the reality is that they don't take any money out of the actual amount you charge for a car park. They fine people and they make money from the fines. I was asked about punitive fines and things like that. The reality is that a certain number of people simply never pay for their parking, pretty much wherever they are. And these companies, they operate all around the world, operating this technology everywhere, and they make money from fining people who simply won't ever pay. It just seems to me that this is the time to see that this works. That's why we're doing what we're doing. It's run extremely successfully in Newquay. I think the car park in Newquay is actually, I think it's 3 times more profitable than it was last year. So this would enable us, again, after testing, and we have to see where everything works out, but you know, it would allow us to take something that is actually costing the people of Cornwall. You think when something costs Cornwall Council money, that means effectively all of us are paying for people to stay in our car parks. I would like to turn that into something that perhaps at the very least breaks even, or perhaps even brings some money into Cornwall. I think that would be a very nice way forward. So we're going to test this. And when we look to roll out to potentially another 30 car parks, assuming that our tests are successful, you know, we'll be consulting with everybody thoroughly on that. So I hope that's a full answer to your question. Thank you, sir.
I dread to ask, have you got a supplementary?
I have a supplementary. Yeah. Why do you not transfer the 3 Cornwall Council car parks in Lanston to Lanston Town Council? We have a multi-storey which is making about £80,000 a year in profit. We are perfectly capable of running the other 3, making a profit to stay within the town of Lanston. I am sure other parish councils, other town councils can do exactly the same and do it. Part of the problem with Cornwall Council is they're not maintaining them properly. We have 3 walls in Lanston where Budleigh
30 seconds.
And rather than get a guy with a cherry picker to go up, cut the Budleigh down before it's grown very much and just
time is up.
It's left for months, and that makes a full rebuild of the wall. Maintenance is essential. Thank you.
Again, I realise I've been talking for quite some time, but part of the issue is that the legislation for councils to use ANPR parking isn't actually there yet. And so, again, it depends on the car park, depends on the place. You know, usually we operate a very rural network of car parks, and so enforcement's very difficult. I recognise you would then argue, well, Launceston can simply look after its own. As I said earlier, we've got to balance our assets and our liabilities. So if we gave away a load of car parks that were bringing in a substantial amount of money, we'd have a budget hole to fill. The other problem you'd also find is that when we're talking about ANPR, we're talking about a very, very significant increase in efficiency, orders of magnitude. You're not having to pay anybody to go and check and ticket and then follow all this up. It's just automated. Launceston Town Council would be under the same constraints as Cornwall Council on this one, which is exactly why we're doing the lease to another operator. So you may find that Launceston, in the fullness of time, uses the same strategy that we do. I hope that helps.
Good to see you back, Councillor Long. It's your turn.
Morass, Lisa. Thank you very much. Yes, it's nice to come back with actually 2 arms almost working. My question, I hate to say this, is from Councillor Williams-Pears. I travelled this morning down the wonderfully now open A30. Very nice, wonderful. £300 million well spent, apparently. But before I got to that, I went on the A38. It's full length in Cornwall from the Tamar Bridge to Bodmin. Could you advise me what is the latest update on your pressure that you're promised that you're going to be putting on the previous government, which I hope you're now putting on the new government, to take urgent action on the A38? We cannot afford, it's bad for business. Last week we had twice, there were 2 or 3 hour delays, no cars moving at all on the A38, and that is nothing compared with the loss of life that you get on that road, which has got to be one of the worst in the UK. So now the Glamour A30 has been completed. Could you advise what pressure is now being put on the central government to sort out the A38 in Cornwall, please?
Councillor Williams-Pears.
Thank you, Councillor Long. As you say correctly, we were putting pressure on the previous government. I'd written to the Transport Minister, and now we have a new government in. We're actually awaiting the King's speech on Wednesday. I will be renewing my letter to the Transport Minister, to the new Transport Minister, that is. But we're also in the process of setting up our first meetings with new MPs, new ministers, etc. So literally, as soon as they're coming on stream, we are engaging with them, and I will certainly be renewing my letter to the Minister at the earliest possibility. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do. The definition of madness is to do the same things time and time again and expect a different response. What are you going to do new to bring this up the agenda? We cannot afford to have many more people dying on our Cornish Road, on the A38, which has been neglected for decades, not just by this administration or the previous government, but many before. We need action. We need action now.
Councillor Williams-Pears.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We absolutely do. And I don't want to sound in any way flippant or talking about the processes, but quite simply, I wrote to the last minister. Before the last minister could respond to me, there has now been a change of government, so I have not had a response from the previous administration, and I will be writing to the new administration to receive a response there.
Councillor German.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I was just smiling at the thought of writing letters to government and how the Cabinet used to chide people for writing a letter to government, but seems it's all that they've got in their armoury nowadays. Madam Chairman, my question's for Councillor Alvey. Whilst some people may deny the facts that we can see with our eyes, would Councillor Alvey agree with me that the new Labour government's for action of lifting the effective ban on onshore wind is a really welcome move? And further, all of the work that Cornwall Council have done around having onshore wind turbines on our own land, can he let me know if that work has been dusted off? And for example, on council land at the top of Tregony, will we expect to see planning applications coming in, and if so, when? Thank you.
Councillor Alvey.
I think the jury's going to be out on how the onshore wind announcement is going to settle. Certainly in Cornwall, we've already been well ahead of the game in terms of onshore wind. One of the challenges down here, clearly, you'll know, is grid connection. So you're not going to see a plethora of onshore wind unless there's the opportunity to plug into the grid. I think the local area energy plan, when that goes out to consultation, will give you some information that might be helpful in this, and clearly as a councillor you can also respond to that consultation. In terms of on the County Farms estate, I'm very early days at the moment, so I can't say that we've dusted down any plans for previous onshore wind generation within the estate, but it'll be looked at. Certainly, I don't have the same difficulty with onshore wind as I do with solar on agricultural land, but as I say, a lot depends on the piece of land in particular and whether there's a viable grid supply to plug into it.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you. Councillor Alvey, all of the work is there, ready and waiting to go, so please talk to your officers about it. And would you agree with me that whilst we do have grid constraints, we have a great opportunity around local energy markets
And for example, to use the Tregony one, the creation of a local energy market around Tregony and the Roseland would help to increase energy security and drive down costs for our hard-pressed residents. Thank you.
I certainly agree that the energy market, as it's currently structured, there is the opportunity for local area energy, which will in turn be able to bring these things online, and also in a way that carries public support with it. Hopefully, when the local area energy plan is published, you'll actually see a lot of this starting to come out within the details of that.
Councillor Martin.
Councillor Alvey, even if climate change is nothing to do with carbon dioxide, do you agree with me that investing in energy from the sunshine and the wind rather than fossil fuels, investing in helping people to insulate their homes so they use less energy, helping people to make the transition to electric cars that are more reliable and don't have 2,000 moving parts to go wrong, for all those reasons, even if climate change has nothing to do with carbon dioxide, it is still absolutely in the best interests of our economy and every household in Cornwall that we go as fast as we can to get away from fossil fuels and move towards renewable energy.
Councillor Alvey.
I think with the caveat around farm-scale solar, yes, I would agree with you.
Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. I understand tomorrow is the first meeting of the Cornwall Climate Commission, which should help us to move these things forward. Can you tell me, is that meeting going to happen in public? Can either councillors or members of the public go and watch the meeting? Is there any facility to ask questions to the meeting? And how much money is Cornwall Council putting towards the running of the Climate Commission? Thank you.
Councillor Alvey.
So in terms of your first question, I can't answer that. That'll be up to the Climate Commission itself. Clearly, it is not Cornwall Council's Climate Commission. It's a self-managing body. So it would be very nice if they do live stream their meetings or hold them in public. I think tomorrow when Justin Olasunde, who's the chair, holds the first meeting, we'll see how they're going to conduct their business and how they're going to do it in a way that the wider residents of Cornwall can engage with it. I know that they're also in the process of bringing their website up to date. Following that first meeting a few weeks ago was a joint meeting with the development group and the prospective commissioners. I know a couple have dropped off since then, but if it's not there today, hopefully by tomorrow on their website you'll see who all the commissioners are, a little bit of a biog. Excuse me. In terms of the money, for the first 2 years of its existence, Cornwall Council has committed to, from the carbon neutral Cornwall budget, to support to the tune of up to 10,000, matched by the university. So that's for those first 2 years. Some of that might be actually in hard cash, other might be contributions in kind, such as officer support and provision of premises.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for a change, my question is for Councillor William Pearce, and it concerns the A30. And if I may just add, with great respect to Councillor Long, the A30 has not been completed. It is a joy to drive from Carland to Chivenor. It is a joy. The joy ends just west of Camborne, and it's miserable. And as from next week with the school holidays, it's going to be blue murder. The queues are half a mile to a mile just to the Logansmoor roundabout. Once you transgress that, you have an option. You can try to beat the queue that's on the bypass by going through Hale, which has its own problems. It's impossible. And if you do take the bypass, you queue for another half to 1 mile. Part of the real problem, of course, is the traffic lights at St. Earth. And even if they could be demolished, you're still going to flood that part with traffic. I know there is no immediate solution, and I know there's little money. But would you agree with me, Councillor, that it's time we put together and formulate a proper strategy that evaluates the problem so that we can make proper and formal approaches to national highways to say, please finish the job. Thank you.
Councillor Williams-Pearce.
Thank you. And yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the first things that you learn in transport is that anytime you solve a problem, it pushes it down the road, as it were, or down the rails, or down indeed anything you're doing your transport with. And so, yes, you've just highlighted that issue. We've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort improving the A30, and for that part of the A30, things are very, very much improved. But of course, that now increases the stress on the weaker parts of the infrastructure. You're completely right. Highways are aware of this. I'm aware of this. Highways England are aware of this. And actually, that's part of what's already happening. We're doing a review on that at the moment. That is being looked into. But I'll, if you'd send me an email about it, I'll make sure you're copied in, and we keep you abreast of all the changes and any updates that come forward. I hope that helps.
Do you have a supplementary?
Very briefly, thank you, Chair. Just to state that if you do want to meet, we could meet in a car on the A30 because it won't be moving. We won't be bothered. Thank you.
Councillor Rich.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just for the transport member on the car park situation. Obviously, you know, I said to Councillor Gardner the other day, in certain situations, it's actually getting a private company in where there's a really big problem. You need a hard-nosed response to it. But Cornwall Council already run car parks with ANPR. They run them really well. A lot of people would suggest that private companies rely on catching people out and fining them, making payment really difficult, confusing people. Actually, Cornwall Council ANPR car parks are very friendly in comparison. There's always somebody to help if you press the button, because 99% of people want to pay. So why can't we, if we're going to do ANPR, why can't we just continue what we're already doing?
Councillor Williams-Pearce.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Unfortunately, there is a very key error in it, which is that councils are not allowed, the legislation is not there for councils to operate ANPR car parks at all, anywhere in the country. And so that's why what's happening, that's why we're going about this, the route we're going about this. Again, when we start looking at this in detail, you'll be able to see a lot more of the details of it. And so you'll see the very, very significant cost differences between literally sending someone with a van to go and look at cars and having a camera do it automatically. I can see you disagreeing with me there, so I'll let you come back.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't know what you want to call it, but in Gareth Wharf and the Harbour Car Park in Penzance, it has a system to recognise your number plate. My understanding was that means automatic number plate. Well, whatever it is, please could you tell me the amount of money we're losing from non-compliance? Because I would imagine it's near, unless you want to smash through the barriers to get out, how on earth are you supposed to not pay when you go in there? Because it won't let you out. And can I also suggest that pay on exit is the best way to do it. Again, these private companies don't want us to pay on exit because they want to catch us out. The council, I think we're kind of a fair player in this game.
Councillor Williams-Pearce.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there, and sorry for the confusion. Yes, the number plate is recognised on a pay-on-exit car park. However, the number plate isn't recognised to enforce because there's a barrier there, so it doesn't need to be. So it's, yes, the ANPR is actually a system that's used in both. So I apologise for the lack of clarity on that one. The problem with pay-on-exit car parks, because I agree with you again there, that pay-on-exit would seem to be the way forward. The problem is that because the entire world has gone over to simply ANPR systems, pay-on-exit barrier systems have sort of been left high and dry. We find a heck of a lot of trouble fixing, maintaining and keeping our barrier systems working. Those of you who have barrier systems in your areas will be aware that there's an awful lot of downtime with them, an awful lot of problem with maintenance. And then, of course, when somebody does decide to bend it or break it or run into it, it knocks the whole system out. So unfortunately, pay-on-exit car parks are just seen as a bit of a dead end, really. The costs just go up and up every single year, and there's actually some councils around the country that are actually taking theirs out due to the fact it's just not economical to keep them in place. Again, around the country and around the world, most car parks are now ANPR systems because that's the system of choice. It's the easiest way of doing things. So this is our approach to enabling us to access that. But I can see a lot of head shaking, but I'm not quite sure at what. If someone could clarify what the issue is.
Okay, we move on to Councillor Fitter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This question is to Councillor Monk. Councillor Monk, you, along with an endorsement from Councillor Harris, told this chamber not so many months ago that money was not the problem in building houses. Indeed, you said the council had plenty of money. Money was not the problem. Do you still have plenty of money? And if so, what is the problem about building the houses?
Councillor Monk.
Yeah, we still have money to build houses. The key issue is to making sure that they get delivered. And I think time and time again, what we've come up against is the capacity to be able to build the houses as quickly as we would like to build them. And obviously over the last few years, with the rise in interest rates, it's the effect which has greatly affected the viability from when I first spoke. It's trying to make sure that the houses that we do build are affordable for local people to buy or rent. And that, I think, is across the country as well, the slowed down housing delivery across the country. So, again, it's not always a question of money. It comes down to, you've seen, we've just bought 50 houses from the open market that will be to ease the temporary emergency accommodation, and we are purchasing those properties across the county right now. So we do have money available to buy houses. The delivery of houses is inextricably linked with the actual capacity to build them, getting them through planning and making sure there's a viable proposition for developers to actually build them as well.
Do you have a supplementary?
One quick one, with your kind permission, Madam Chairman. Is part of the problem then about delivery the in-house builder, Treveth? Are they delivering as expected?
Councillor Monk.
I think Treveth are doing a fantastic job. I think they've delivered over 100 houses in the last year, and you put that together with our own housing department, which has done over another 120. But you put it together with registered providers such as Coastline, Live West, Ocean. They're all delivering in the hundreds per year now as well. So overall, I think we're doing a reasonable job. The problem is demand, and it's trying to build as many houses as quickly as possible. I think, back to your point on Treveth, I think that their design code and their standards are exemplary, and they make some very, very good quality housing that's in very, very high demand.
Councillor Rushworth.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, by way of a question to Councillor Pearce, and it's regarding vehicle number plate. We can use vehicle number plate, as you've said, but the problem is we can't enforce with it. That is a picture, and you're getting over it by giving it, I think, to Treveth or maybe to a new company who can then operate that system. And so if any town or town parish wants to do that, they would have to go through the same. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely.
No supplementary? Councillor Donathorne.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just quickly before I start, I just want to say thank you to all members across the Chamber who have sent kind words since my very unsuccessful attempt at the general election, but it's good to be back. The £2.6 billion UK Shared Prosperity Fund is critical to communities like Cornwall, and there's a cliff edge with March 2025 in terms of no commitment to extend that funding from what I believe. So a question to Councillor Gardner is, what's your plans for this in place, and how are we going to make the strongest possible representations to continue that funding so that we continue to level up the Cornish economy?
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Councillor Donathorne. First of all, Madam Chair, can I just apologise to the young people at the back of the room? I think some of the behaviour in here this afternoon has not been what you probably need to see and what you need to expect. Your youth parliament held up as a prime example of how you should behave. Well done. Today has not matched that, so I apologise. just say, Councillor Donathorne, yeah, you're absolutely right. So UK shared prosperity funding, irrespective of whether you believe it was enough or not, it's £137.6 million that this council has now 100% committed to over 150 projects across Cornwall. Every single division that is represented in this room today has had at least one project which has been successful and is making a real difference in communities. I've worked with an amazing team that has helped to get that money out of the door and continues to get that money out of the door. It's levered hundreds of jobs and millions of pounds of extra funding, match funding against that. I don't need to say ECDEV scrutiny knows exactly how important this money is. You're right, I'm absolutely scared to death that nothing has been committed from the current government so far. Without even an indication of what comes next, never mind the fact that what Cornwall will get of any of that money. So I worry about Cornwall's place in the priorities of the government in terms of local funding to be decided locally to help local businesses, charities and other organisations. So what am I going to do about it? Well, as ECDEV will know, I've made that case repeatedly with previous ministers, and I will carry on making that case again. You will see something from me in the next 24 hours that highlights me making the argument to central government. A letter has already gone from the leader and from Lord Hutton as chair of the Economic Forum to make that case that Cornwall absolutely needs this. Let me be clear, and be clear to every member of this council, what will happen if we do not get that funding, or we do not even get it at the same level that we've been enjoying. We have some incredible initiatives. Some of them started by credit where it's due, previous administration, the People Hub, the Growth Hub. The People Hub offering support to hundreds of people a week across Cornwall at no cost to support them into work via training and upskilling. That will end. The Growth Hub supporting hundreds of businesses with match funding, with professional support, the one-stop shop for all business support in Cornwall. That will end. Cornwall Trade and Investment supporting Cornish businesses to go out and sell their wares in the wider world and attract inward investment into Cornwall from businesses Europe and the worldwide and the rest of the UK. That will end. It will all end, as well as all your community centres that have received funding, all of your projects, all of your charities. So I will be speaking to MPs at the first opportunity. I spoke to 2 of the MPs just in the last sort of 7 days. But it's down to all of us to keep making this case to the government. They've apparently promised to support Cornwall. Where's the evidence? Where's the money? Where's the figures? Irrespective of whether it's more or less, we need that finance in Cornwall. We were talking this morning about fairer funding via Councillor Martin, and it's not just about fairer funding in local government settlements. We actually need some of these other initiatives to come online. I don't care what you call it, but Cornwall needs that money, and it needs all of us to make that case. I will carry on maintaining that case. I'm relying on the 6 MPs. I'm hoping that the 2 Cornwall councillors that haven't yet given up their seats will see the need, and they'll go and argue in Parliament on our behalf.
Do you have a supplementary? Councillor LeBroy.
Thank you. My question is for Councillor Harris. Just want to keep you on your toes there, David. It refers to the Mid-Cornwall Metro project that we're embarking on. And it's my understanding that Cornwall Council has either committed or will commit to underwrite any overspend on the project. This sets serious alarm bells ringing in my mind, and my question to you is, are you satisfied that we have performed due diligence on understanding the future risk to our finances?
Councillor Harris.
How long have you got for an answer? All right, what the deal is, and I'll step back one, I hope I don't stray into anything I shouldn't stray into. Government said it would put up 50 million quid, roughly. We put up 3 million quid, roughly. The risk is that we are the accountable body, which means we have to deliver it, and if it overspends, we have to find the money. There is also a risk that if it goes over time, which is March 26, I'm looking at Phil Mason, yes, March 26, then costs after then are not reclaimable. So they're the risks, and yes, there are very palatable risks. You will remember when this came, I think, to Cabinet some time ago, maybe December, for decisions. The decision was taken to go ahead on the basis that we would have an opportunity to pull out of it following a detailed cost review, and that opportunity arises effectively the end of this month. Now, I, with Councillor Williams-Pears, have been meeting with the team involved in this regularly to look at numbers and where they've got to, and to see where they can get to on certainty in terms of costs. That is all now coming to a head. I'm not going to sit there and tell you it's all brilliant. I will sit there and tell you that if I think there's a risk, I'm going to it.
Do you have a supplementary to that one?
Well, I'm very glad to hear that, David. My supplementary was, and I'm hoping you're going to say yes to this, is have you actually calculated what our future commitment could be in pounds and pence based on a variety of different scenarios of overspend, i.e. plus 10, 15, 20, 25% and so on?
Well, no, but I can do it, but it's a £50 million project, so if it's plus 10%, it's £5 million quid. If it's plus 20%, it's 10 million quid. So yes, I've now calculated it, but it's not a risk we want to take. And that is the key thing, in my view certainly, and the delegation on this from the last cabinet was to Mr Mason in consultation with the transport portfolio holder and the deputy leader, which is why we've been having regular meetings to look at it and make sure we've got as much certainty as we can get. I mean, I'll be frank with you, there is a risk on the back of this that scares the bejesus out of me, and you've got to make sure you've got room on the other side of it to deal with it. And what this risk is that on the heavy rail, the rail works, the signalling, which is done by Network Rail, you cannot get a fixed price contract. If you went for a fixed price contract, it's going to be 10 million quid more than the indication for a, I forgot what it's called now, a moving price contract, something like that, and a year later to deliver. I don't quite understand why. So we are looking at entering into a contract with Network Rail. So the more detail we get in terms of up to the minute estimates, and there's a better word than estimate here because there's more certainty involved. Before we take that decision, the better. But that decision comes up in the next, well, less than the next month.
Are you happy now? Yep. Okay, Councillor Ewart.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for Councillor Gardner. After we have spent the morning talking about cooperative work across this council and cross-party work in terms of making things better for Cornwall, and after you have just spoken to the young people in this chamber about better behaviour and how you apologise for that, would you like to take back your remarks that are attacking the new Labour government before they've even had a chance to do anything, and instilling fear in people that we're going to be at a cliff, that we're going to drop off a cliff and that we're not going to do anything? I think you deserve to let the new Labour government and our new MPs, Labour and Lib Dem, have a chance to get things moving first.
Councillor Gardner.
I await what comes next. However, we are on a cliff edge. That is the reality of it. We're on a timetable. If we drop off a cliff edge, everything ends at the end of March. In order to not drop off that cliff edge, we have to have a decision by Christmas. That is the timetable we're facing. Now, I agree we've got to give them a chance, absolutely, and I'm openly allowing them a chance, because I want to see, I'm really interested to see. I don't want to see this fail. I don't want to see nothing happen. But that's the stark reality of it. We are time pressed. We cannot afford a gap in that funding. And to that end, my call has actually been for a year's extension, because I believe that that is the best option. Just say, okay, we'll look at this properly in the fullness of time, okay, but we need a year's extension. If we don't get that year's extension by Christmas, that is where a gap will appear. This council cannot afford to bridge any gap between government funding streams. It's just the reality of the situation. I have to be open, I have to be honest with everyone. ECDEV are fully aware of that timetable. We've discussed it in ECDEV before, but every councillor needs to be aware that we are on a timetable. It is a cliff edge. We can't afford to wait too long.
Do you have a supplementary?
I think that's a little point, thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I ask my question, could I just check that you haven't sent anybody out from this chamber for foul language or misbehaviour, or that they haven't expecting a phone call from you to say that they've behaved badly? Because that is the case. Nobody has behaved badly, in your opinion. No. So I'm a little bit mystified why we should be apologising for our behaviour, because I haven't seen anything myself other than a good display of shared views. And to be quite honest, the behaviour I've witnessed today has been far better than some of the lessons I taught at some of my schools. But the young people present in those lessons made very, very positive comments, and I managed to work through them. My question, more of an observation, is to thank Councillor Mould for her very swift response to the issues that I'm receiving in a parochial level in terms of the waste management as it rolls out. And also a request, perhaps through her, whether we as local members might have some consideration when management officers, waste management officers, make decisions, that they could actually be asked to consult with us as members. I realise I don't have high-level qualifications in waste management, but I do have an observational eye that can assess a situation and really feel that a resident has made a reasonable request. But I wish to thank you, really, very quick response. I wish your colleagues were as fast as you are. Thank you.
Councillor Mould.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your kind words. And I have to say, we do have some thorny issues, and I think going forward, and it's a discussion I have had with Service Director today, that I think we need to be more engaged with you, because actually all the information I received from you made this easier to resolve and to understand. I think some of these issues, when we get them through emails and just messaging, it's difficult to understand, and maybe, you know, we need to have a closer look and maybe look at them in a little bit in depth and go back and revisit. So thank you for your kind words, and we really do try hard. And, you know, I just would like to say that given that the scale of this rollout, the complaints we have compared to the rollout are minimal, but they are important to the people that have them, and they are important that we resolve them quickly. And I also don't want this to affect other parts of the service where maybe we're concentrating on sorting these things out and we're maybe not delivering our brown bins correctly or whatever. You know, there is going to be a knockback through the service if we're not careful, but we are on it, and thank you very much.
Do you have a supplementary?
Not really, just to say thank you. It was a genuine thanks, but maybe a tangential question through Councillor Mould to Councillor Williams-Pears. Could he publish the 30 car parks list as soon as possible? Thank you.
That's a different question. And unfortunately, the time is up. 60 minutes has now gone. So we're going to move on to agenda item 12, which is any other business that the chairman considers to be urgent, which I have none. So we're going to move on to agenda item 13, which is exclusion of the press and public. I will move, and my vice chairman will second, that the press and public, with the exception of our professional contractor from Nub Sound, be excluded from the meeting for the following item: leave of absence request for Councillor Towell, on the grounds that there is likely to be a disclosure to the public of exempt information of the following description: information relating to an individual. Councillor Rouse, please second.
Happy to second.
We will now go to the vote. Oh.
To go into private. To go into private.
To go into private session.
Right, I'm going to close the vote.
Okay, that's carried. Thank you.